Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name's Ann Morgan. I'm the chair of the Toronto Police Services Board. I'd like to welcome you all to this hybrid meeting of the board. Also, like to acknowledge this land that we are upon as we hold this meeting. It's the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The board also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Now, moving to next item, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, let me proceed. I will now turn over to the board's executive director, Dr. Doobie Cannon-Gisser, who will go over the meeting's logistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone who has joined us in person, as well as those who have called into this meeting. Please note this meeting is also being live streamed on the Toronto Police YouTube account and will be available there at the conclusion of this meeting. Joining us in person, we have Chair Ann Morgan, Board Member Nadine Spencer, Councillor John Burnside, and joining us virtually are Deputy Mayor Amber Morley, Councillor Liddy Chang, and Board Member Nick Migliori, and our Vice Chair Lisa Kostakis should be joining us shortly. We also have members of our board office staff, Chief Demkew and his command team, members of the service, and of course, members of the public. We have individuals who have registered to make deputations, both in person as well as virtually, on our agenda items. And as per our regular meeting process, deputations will be heard prior to the item being discussed and voted on by the board members. When it comes time to do a deputation, those who have registered will be called upon or brought into the meeting. And as always, deputants will speak, followed by an opportunity for board members to ask them questions. Chair.
Thank you, Doobie. Before we begin today's meeting, I'd like to say a few words about three exceptional individuals, past and present Toronto Police Service members, who each received prestigious award at the 31st Annual Association of Black Law Enforcers, ABLE, Scholarship and Awards Gala held on November 4th. At the gala, Police Constable Adam Holness of 33 Division, who's been with the service for 3 years, received the Rising Star Award, which recognizes an individual with less than 10 years in the field, but who has constantly demonstrated excellence, professionalism, dedication, and teamwork. This award was presented to Constable Holness in recognition of his early accomplishments that distinguish him as a high-potential future leader. He started his career as a Yippie in 2013, graduated from York University, and was rehired in a civilian capacity as a program assistant to the Yippie program in 2020. In 2023, Constable Holness was sworn as a constable, and he serves to mentor young people and is very active in his church community. Secondly, we have Ms. Roseanne Bailey, a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist with the service, who was presented with the esteemed Program Innovation Award, which recognizes an individual who's created, developed, or led an initiative that has contributed to public safety, job improvements, or enhanced community engagement and relations. The award was given to Ms. Bailey for her excellent work and leadership in gender diversity and trans inclusion project, and an industry-leading initiative which has been successful in creating very meaningful change in training procedures and practice and building bridges with our 2S LGBTQ+ community. And lastly, ABLE recognized retired Deputy Chief Keith Ford with the Monumental Legacy Award, which recognizes an individual who's made a profound and lasting contribution to law enforcement over an extended period. It is given to an individual who's left an indelible mark and has significantly influenced the organization and community. The decision made to award this great honor to Deputy Chief Ford for his positive work for breaking barriers and demonstration of Black excellence through his career. There are many, many, many achievements, and I'll just highlight a few of retired Deputy Chief Ford in 38 years. In 2005, he was appointed the rank of Deputy Chief of HR Command, first Black officer to attain that rank in Toronto Police Service's history. He increased the diversity that we see today of new recruits and promotions, and he also championed many programs that were not just first in Toronto Police Service, but also across the country in law enforcement, also including Services Wellness Day and wellness programs and the internal support networks. Since retired, Deputy Chief Ford continues to work in community organizations, including the Olive Branch of Hope and Sickle Cells Camp Jamoke. We join ABLE in congratulating retired Deputy Chief Ford for this tremendous achievement, honoring the incredible impact he's had on so many lives and communities. I'd also like to acknowledge this year's winner of the Peter Butler and Rose Fortune Scholarship, named for these trailblazers who are widely accepted as the first Black officer in Canada over 100 years ago. The Toronto Police Service sponsored one of 10 scholarships, which was presented to Rihanna Bridge. Rihanna is working on her last year of her Honours Bachelor of Arts at University of Toronto. She's proud of the mentorship work she's engaged with the Amani Black Academic Program at the university, which fosters academic excellence and understanding of how identity shapes and experiences our youth. She's conducted many research projects on systemic issues within the legal system, trying to raise awareness and influence at both local and national levels. She's aiming to attend law school to spearhead this pursuit and to implement reform directly through a career in law. The board is proudly joined with ABLE in congratulating these winners. Finally, I've recently met with ABLE President Jackie Edwards to discuss how the board and ABLE can continue to strengthen our work together. I'd like to convey to the board the gratitude expressed by the leadership of ABLE for the board's continued support of the Scholarship and Awards Gala and of our commitment to work with ABLE, addressing common matters within our memberships. So just very briefly, before I go through the agenda items, I just ask for a round of applause for all these folks. Thank you. The first motion I have is if you turn to item number 5, which is a report from Chief Demkew as it relates to a service complaint investigation. We do have Mr. Jason Bogle who'd like to speak on that today, and he's only available at 10 o'clock. So I wonder if we could have a motion to accommodate Mr. Bogle's schedule. I see Deputy Morley, seconded by Councillor Chang, and all in favor. So at this point, I will go through the list and begin our agenda, and then we will break at 10 o'clock for Mr. Bogle, and he'll be joining us virtually. All right, the first item is the confirmation of the minutes, and that is a hold down. The second item is a presentation on gun violence and bail reform. We have a number of deputations on that as well. We'll hold that down. Number 3 is the 2024 meeting schedule. And it appears we have to hold that down. We do have some deputations. Number 4 is a report from Chief Demkew. It's a request for funds for the Youth and Policing Luncheon and Awards. Can I have a motion to approve that? Lisa, seconded by Nadine. All in favor? All right, carried. Item number 4. Number 5, as indicated, there's a hold down. We have deputations, and as well we have Mr. Jason Bogle, who was counsel for the complainant and would like to speak. Item number 6 is hold down. It relates to special constable appointments. And number 7 is a hold down as well. It relates to publication of expenses from January to June 30th. And we have a deputation, number 8, as well. We have an annual TPS report from Chief Demkew, and Mr. Langenfeld wishes to make a deputation. Number 9 is the Toronto Police Audit and Quality Assurance Annual Report from Chief Demkew. Again, a hold down for 2 deputants. Number 10 are the Chief's Administration Investigative Reports, and again, we have a virtual deputation for Mr. Langenfeld. So perhaps I could go back to the beginning. And we can commence with Chief, please, with your monthly update.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. The impact of the events in the Middle East in our city is ongoing and has escalated since October 7th. This escalation has manifested in a number of ways that impacts your police service. The sheer number of demonstrations taking place in the city on almost a daily basis is an important example. Also of note is the significant spike in the number of hate crimes being committed and reported. Geopolitical unrest in the Middle East has generated unprecedented tensions in our city, which has necessitated the urgent redeployment of our officers. Our members, our senior leadership, and I personally have seen and felt the fear experienced within our communities firsthand, and we are employing every effort possible to restore the sense of safety and security for the people of this city, while also ensuring that the right to self-expression is protected. My opening remarks in their entirety will focus on what we call Project Resolute and our response to these events. Lest anyone try to misconstrue the meaning of the term, let me be clear. We are resolute in our mission to ensure public safety and security, while also ensuring that the constitutionally protected right to free speech and assembly is maintained. There are limits on rights. The right to safety and security does not mean people won't occasionally be uncomfortable when they hear things with which they disagree. And freedom of expression ends when it becomes criminal. Many from the Greater Toronto Area and beyond have made their way here to participate in a whole host of demonstrations and gatherings. One of the ways in which Toronto is unique is that the city has served as the main stage for the vast majority of large-scale demonstrations in relation to global events, especially the current events in the Middle East. The number of demonstrations and gatherings since October 7th have been extraordinary. Not to mention that some of these October events were large-scale demonstrations with upwards of 25,000 participants that included a significant number of out-of-town attendees. Our officers are well-trained. However, these demonstrations pose challenges to your police service. They are, by their very nature, dynamic situations that sometimes present a risk to public safety, and in particular, with crowds of this size moving through the downtown core, we have seen traffic flow often disrupted as a result, sometimes unintentionally, and sometimes by design of some of the demonstrators, despite the best intentions of the organizers. In the days following October 7th, we activated our Major Incident Command Center, known to us as the MIC. The MIC currently remains operational 7 days a week to oversee overall operations and ensure effective handling and coordination of Project Resolute. Indeed, in the days following October 7th, I declared a critical point, and we advised this board of the particulars of the issues we face and how we have had to adjust and rise to the challenges. I want to take this opportunity to thank our members. They have been doing a phenomenal job in facilitating these demonstrations and other gatherings. thereby ensuring the safety of thousands attending these events. I am proud of the work that our members do on the front lines and those who are working behind the scenes on a daily basis. As asked of them, many of our specialized non-uniform officers have a uniform at the ready or reporting uniform ready to deploy at a moment's notice. Again, I thank all of our members for your attentiveness and unrelenting commitment to public safety. As I mentioned, the number of reported hate incidents and hate crimes has increased, and since October 7th, increased at a staggering rate. As your police chief, I am readily aware that the impact of crime motivated by hate is far-reaching and extends beyond the physical and emotional trauma suffered by the victim, affecting all members of the targeted community and beyond. I will be sharing some alarming statistics to help put this in perspective. Since October 7th, we have seen an overall increase in hate crimes. This includes increases in reports of anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab-related hate crimes, of which we only had one instance within the time frame since October 7th last year. Now we have seen this number climb to 17 occurrences, which is a staggering 1,600% increase. Year to date, there's been 34 total anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab-related hate crime occurrences, up from 14 the year prior, reflecting an increase of 143%. Also included within the spectrum is a marked increase in anti-LGBTQ2S+ hate crimes, which is also cause for concern. During this time frame, last year, there were 5 occurrences. This year, we have seen the number increase to 9. 80% higher. However, amongst all of the hate crimes that have been reported during this period, I can tell you that anti-Semitism makes up over 49% of this overall amount. That's 38 of 78 total occurrences. Since October 7th to date, anti-Semitism is up 192% for the same time period last year, and 322% for that time period the year prior. In terms of all hate crime reported this year, anti-Semitism makes up 40% of all of these occurrences. That's 129 of 323 total. These alarming trends in our city, which prides itself in our diversity, are the likes of which we have never seen before. To combat these deeply concerning issues, we have committed a significant number of resources to address these overall increases, as well as every category of hate. We have bolstered and expanded our hate crime unit from 6 members to a team of 32. Since the events of October 7th, our hate crime unit has been responsible for 22 arrests, 58 charges laid in relation to hate crime occurrences. 1 identified suspect remains outstanding on an arrest warrant. 5 of those arrested were young persons under the age of 18. The most common charges laid were for uttering threats, conspiracy to commit mischief over $5,000, and assault with a weapon. We'll remain steadfast in our resolve to hold those responsible accountable. This expansion of the hate crime unit, however, is being done with current resources, which has impacted other areas of our police service, which I will describe later in my remarks. During the period of October 7th to today's date, we have seen a significant spike in hate-related graffiti. These incidents are carefully assessed and evaluated to determine whether they meet our criteria as hate crimes and criminal offenses or as non-criminal hate incidents. There have been 63 hate graffiti occurrences that were anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab during this time period. There were only 2 reported during the same period last year. There have been 217 occurrences that were anti-Semitic during this period. There were 19 during the same period last year. Due to the rise in and of graffiti incidents, our service recently devised a new and more efficient means of reporting and responding to this increased number of hate-motivated graffiti calls for service. We have developed a hate graffiti web form Intake on this forum is monitored 24/7 for officers to be dispatched to investigate. This new web forum became available for public use on November 8th, and since then, there have been 90 web submissions received. We will continue to investigate each and every instance of hate, and we will continue to encourage all members of our neighborhoods and communities to report all incidents of hate. As you are aware, we continue to maintain a high level of visibility in our communities. Our 2 command posts remain where they are most vital, to serve local communities and where our officers can be within sight and within reach of those that need us the most. Our members are continuously amazed by and grateful for the warm reception they've received. Project Resolute remains a large-scale operation, given the complexity of the geopolitics involved. In ensuring that we remain in the most effective posture with the most effective measures in securing the safety and well-being of our communities, we have made a significant investment of resources for this initiative. Not only is there a complement of officers from each division from across the city dedicated to Project Resolute, there are those that are pulled from our specialized units as well to help mitigate the impact of what is happening in our city. Though we have moved quickly to do so, I would be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to tell you that there's been an inherent cost, which is significant. I've articulated our resolve and dedication to our communities, that we are especially in need of our enhanced presence. And I can tell you that the redeployment and transferring of much-needed policing resources during an unprecedented time where our service has never been so lean has produced significant challenges. This prioritization of immediate public safety needs also includes our response time to Priority 1 calls, which are currently averaging 25 minutes. Regrettably, I share with you that drawing officers from other areas has created a situation where currently some of our work remains on pause or is at risk of shutting down completely. I can tell you that on a daily basis, 36 officers comprised of 1 senior officer, groups of traffic services, detective operations, and Toronto Police College instructors are drawn from across the city. In addition, divisions across the city deploy resources to places of worship and schools as required. A large group of on-duty officers have been called upon to join our public order callouts for demonstrations. As I mentioned earlier, we have bolstered our hate crime unit. Our cyber crime teams have also been provided with further support in terms of resourcing. All areas within policing bear their own level of significance for our communities. But we have been presented with a situation where we have had to reorganize and prioritize. We will ask for the support of all our valued communities as we continuously aim to replenish our strength to an adequate standard through recruitment drives so that our most relied upon programs remain in place and that there is no further loss of the valued units or initiatives as we have experienced in the recent past. We have asked a lot from our members over the past several weeks to ensure we are able to prioritize the safety and well-being of our communities, and they have risen to the challenge. Tirelessly, our members continue on with their incredible work and our commitment to keep all of our communities safe. We continue to monitor the circumstances around the world and to do work with all of our law enforcement partners, including other GTA services, the OPP, and the RCMP. I can assure you that there is no credible threat to Toronto at this time. However, in terms of this abhorrent increase in hate-motivated crimes and incidents within our city, I want to be clear. We at the Toronto Police Service will not allow the people of our city to be intimidated. Violence and acts of violence will not be tolerated. The service in our hate crime unit will aggressively uncover and pursue any suspected incidents of hate-motivated behavior. Hate will have no space here, and the unwavering dedication of our members to this cause will continue for as long as it takes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chief. We will then move on to item number 1, which is the confirmation of the minutes from the regular public meeting, which was held on October 19th, 2023. First person to speak is Mr. Jamie Kersner Roberts from the Center from Israel and Jewish Affairs. Mr. Roberts? Sorry? Oh, Miss. Sorry. I apologize. Ms. Kersner Roberts, please come forward.
Hi. Again, I'm Jamie Kersner Roberts. I'm the Vice President of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, which is the advocacy arm of the Jewish Federations, the largest.
Ms. Roberts,
yeah.
could you turn on your mic so we can hear you clearly?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is
There's
it
a
not
button.
on? It is. Which is the largest Jewish organizations in the country. So I'm here today to share a very simple message in light of the statistics that the chief just shared with us. Look, the last 6 weeks have been really something for the Jewish community here in Toronto. We have been targeted by a campaign of intimidation that is something that I never thought I would see in our city in my lifetime. We have hate organizations operating openly, organizing hate rallies, calling, using violent language, and they are actively trying to instill fear in our hearts. We have seen, so for us Jews, we mark our door with something called a mezuzah, small little ceremonial object on our door frame. And unfortunately, this is something that anti-Semites can use to identify our home, our family home, as belonging to a Jew. And we have seen Jewish homes in this way being vandalized, subject to all kinds of harassment, cars parked outside these homes with their windows smashed. We have seen Jewish businesses being targeted, vandalized, subject to boycotts, and I'm talking random Jewish people and their businesses. We have seen hate rallies outside of Jewish community centers, which service the elderly and preschool students. We've had bomb scares at Jewish schools. I have Jewish families calling me every day, asking me, should I take the mezuzah off my door? Should I stop telling people I'm Jewish? This is the reality that we are facing. That's the human side of some of the dark statistics that the chief shared. I will say that our community could not possibly be more grateful for the response from police over the last 6 weeks. The police have set up mobile command posts in the most densely populated Jewish neighborhoods in the city, and this has gone so far in reassuring the community that we're not sitting ducks to potential hate criminals. I had the privilege of having lunch with the chief in the heart of the Jewish community on the Friday following the terrible terrorist attack in Israel. It was the Friday in which Hamas called for a day of violence against Jews worldwide. It was a day in which most Jewish families did not send their children to school, were not going to work, many Jewish businesses were closed. This was the state of fear in our city, in Toronto, Canada, in 2023. And very graciously, the chief met with me for lunch right in the heart of the community. And I mean, it was like I was with a celebrity. I mean, people were running across this plaza to greet him and to thank him. And I have to say that at one point I burst into tears, not just the gratitude, which was overwhelming and something I've never seen, but because I could see the fear that was in people's eyes, that so dramatic was their response to seeing the police chief there. So the main thing I want to say is thank you. As dark as things feel here, they're not as dark as they are elsewhere. As I think we all know that we've seen multiple shots fired at Jewish institutions in Montreal. We have not thankfully seen a serious injury, or so far the incidents have been more vandalism and threats rather than acts of horrific violence. And I really believe it's because the police have stepped up to protect our community and protect our rights as citizens more than I could have asked. I want to say thank you to all the police officers that put themselves in harm's way every day to protect our community, and to ask you all please to make sure that the police continue to have the resources necessary to ensure that all citizens of our city are safe from violence and intimidation. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts, thank you so much for your heartfelt comments, and I can assure you the board, as well as the chief and his officers from the Toronto Police Service, are committed to provide safety to this community and alleviate the fear you're describing, not just to all of the communities, to the Jewish community, and you have a pledge and commitment for that, and I really thank you for your comments today.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much.
Oh. Amber, did you have a question for Ms. Roberts, or?
Yes, if I may, thank you so much. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and thank you for being here today and for all that you're doing to support the community at this difficult time. I just wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned just for my own clarity and get a better understanding of your perspective on the issue of, you mentioned hate rallies, and obviously the chief started us today commenting on the volume of rallies and gathering that we've been seeing in the city, which is, of course, a big demand on police at this time. Can you help, for my own, again, understanding is, when you mention a hate rally, what's the difference between a pro-Palestinian rally, which I know we've been seeing a huge amount of, and a hate rally, and how those two things present for you from your perspective and for the community?
Thank you so much for that question. It's a good question. And the answer is very simple. Thank God, we live in a democratic society where we all have the right to express ourselves and support political causes that we want to support. To me, a pro-Palestinian rally is one in which people are coming together to support the rights and freedoms of Palestinians. And I myself, I'm a supporter of rights and freedoms for Palestinians. A hate rally is ones like the ones that we have seen over the last 6 weeks, in which people are chanting things like, let's say 2 weekends ago, I saw widespread footage of people here in Toronto chanting in Arabic, slaughter the Zionists. So Zionist is often used as a euphemism for a Jew, and Zionism is the belief that Jews are entitled to their own state. I am a Zionist. They're calling for the slaughter of me. We've seen repeated calls for intifada, which again is an Arabic word which means violent uprising. The intifada, there's been 2 intifadas, moments of violent uprising in Israel, and every Jewish person knows what an intifada means. It means buses exploding. It means suicide bombers detonating their vests inside a school, inside a daycare center, inside a university cafe, on a busy street. This is what intifada means. So to me, hate rallies are very, very distinct from anything I would call a pro-Palestinian rally. There is hate language. We saw last weekend a sign held at one of these rallies with the Star of David, right, which is the symbol of the Jewish people, in a trash can. This is very clear. These are not pro-Palestinian rallies. These are rallies that are trying to intimidate and bring fear to the community, to cause division and unrest and in our city.
Thank you so much for that. I really do
Thank you for your
appreciate it.
question.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Roberts? Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
you
Really
so much.
appreciate you coming today. And the next speaker to make a deputation is Jonathan Levy. Mr. Levy is from the educational facility Tannenbaum Chat. Did I get that right? Thank you.
Good morning. Chair, everyone, thank you for receiving me this morning. My name is Jonathan Levy. I am head of school. That means I am the senior professional at the Ann and Max Tannenbaum Community Hebrew Academy of Toronto in North York with some 1,300 students and 200 staff members. The events of October the 7th, while they sent tremors through the world, the events were an earthquake for our community in terms of worry, in terms of close connection to those involved, and the threats that started to emerge from that day. On October the 13th, a number of our students in the community near the school were the recipients of threats from individuals that they did not know, who threatened that they were going to blow up their school. We immediately called 911. Multiple units responded promptly and swiftly. On November the 17th, this past Friday, I personally received an email copied to some members of my management team that had a bomb threat saying that there were multiple bombs placed through the school and in the parking lot, and that many Jews were going to die on this day. I personally called 911. After on hold for 2 minutes and 17 seconds, I did ask for a police response, which was swift and prompt, with multiple units to help us take control of the situation. Under their careful guidance and supervision, we did evacuate all members of the school. The police conducted a thorough sweep of the school before declaring it safe for us to return. Between those times, we have seen and heard from a community and from students on edge, nervous, seeing and hearing threats, seeing what is being said online, and these students are coming into our school every day. We cannot be grateful enough and express enough gratitude to the police department and Toronto Police Services for their regular presence in and around our school, for engaging with our students and with our parents and with our staff, and trying to bring a sense of calmness in what is an incredibly anxious community. Whether it's in the morning, in the afternoon, or evening program, we have been assured and we rely on police presence simply to provide comfort to those coming into the school. We feel that our community is a target. We feel that our school is a target. And it is the calming presence of the many officers who have come by the school, including the police chief who has visited us on 2 occasions, that provides a sense of calmness and a sense of relief for our community. Our community officer, Officer Gillespie, the local inspector, Inspector Jack Burr, as well as all of the officers, make no hesitation in coming by, in communicating with us, in helping us to open school on a daily basis. Again, where many of our students and many of our parents worry what will happen at drop-off time. No student, no staff member in any community should have to come to school under those circumstances. It is our simple request that the police continue to have the resources necessary to provide the essential service to our community. We represent 1,300 students, 2,600 parents, 5,000 grandparents, all of whom want to see their children and grandchildren and themselves come to school and have a regular life as teenagers should. I open a prayer book every day. My prayer book is some 1,000 pages long. That's why they call us the people of the book, I suppose. I won't give you all of it, but I will finish just with a brief quote from Psalm 121. Hashem yishmorcha mikol ra yishmor et nafshecha. May the Lord watch over you and protect you and keep you from all harm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. Are there any questions or? Lisa?
Thank you. And maybe it's to the chief, when you talked about just for the public to know and be aware of that type of evacuation process, you were saying too that you waited on for over 2 minutes when you called in. Is there a process, whether it's from the school's perspective but also from the police perspective, that we could advise our public as to when an evacuation should begin? Should it be after the police arrive or prior to? And just so it doesn't cause chaos to the community and to the students. So maybe, Chief, you can speak to that. I'm not sure. What would your advice be in a situation like that, and when would evacuation begin?
I can start that for sure, in that, schools have their own protocols, their own capacity, and their own expertise, and we certainly rely on that engagement and partnership that happens at those moments. We certainly encourage all institutions to develop their state of readiness and their ability to respond. And when we arrive, we certainly do our response in a collaborative way with the people responsible for the institution. So, there's no singular answer to that question. It is a collaborative approach, and particularly in situations like at Chat, there's a remarkable leadership and administration there that has done a great job of preparedness. Listen, unfortunately, that's necessary in the world we live in. And it's a bit of a testament to the sad state of affairs in that regard. But they are very prepared and very able, capable, and ready to do what they need to do to keep the students and staff and parents safe. And when we arrive, we do that in collaboration with the school.
Thank you, Chief. I would add that we do have extensive policies and procedures. These are internal documents. We don't share the particulars of all of those. We are incredibly proud of our student body and our staff leadership in this emergency time, with the swiftness and calmness with which they were able to act and evacuate the building. We followed our procedures to a T. We hope never to use them again, but we continue to review, reflect, and learn from what we go through.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both of you, actually, both debutants, for your leadership and your support of the community as well, and just keeping people safe, and hopefully yourselves, like your prayers for us, is also for everyone to be safe.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I echo thank you very much, Ms. Roberts and Mr. Levy. I really appreciate you coming and giving heartfelt comments and continuing to educate us in terms of what the climate is out there, so the board and TPS can respond. And thank you for taking time today, because I really appreciated your input.
Thank you.
Oh.
Chair
Lily?
Morgan, I have a question.
Mr. Levy, she's on the screen behind you virtually.
Okay.
Hi, Rabbi. Thank you for coming. I was just wondering, how are the kids and the teachers and families feeling? It's very traumatic to go through something like that, and what type of support has been provided just in terms of mental health?
Sure. We have 3 pillars in terms of responding to this. We reflect on how do you feel? And that is all of the emotional issues, that there is a range of emotion. There is no right or wrong way to feel. It could be different for everybody. Fear, anxiety, even almost an emotional shutting down. There's a whole range of emotional issues, and we've opened a student crisis, student support team. It's a multidisciplinary team. And the goal is to offer as many services to our students to support them and the mental health. We want to know we face what do we need students to know, what's important to know, whether it's safety procedures, which we are consistently reviewing, whether it's information about what's going on in the city or in the world. And then, of course, is what do we want students to do? What are the action steps that need to be taken, either in the time of crisis or to support one another? We find that a bringing together of students is very valuable. They take tremendous strength in being together. We were privileged to have Toronto Police join us on Monday to talk to students and to answer many of their questions as well. And as the police said, there's a time for no questions, to follow instructions. That was Friday. And then we are a school, there's a time to learn and there's a time to ask questions. And that takes place as well.
Thank you. And I did visit the Jewish school that's in my ward and spoke to some of the moms, and I can feel the palpable anxiety that a lot of parents are feeling right now with the question of where is my child safe? Where can my child feel safe? And so I just wanted to say that I feel a lot of compassion, and I'm very sorry that your community is going through this.
Thank you.
I believe that. Thank you very much, Mr. Levy. And the final deputant, Derek.
You know, you could have let me go first, Chair Morgan. This is a tough act to follow here. So in these minutes, it mentions Executive Director Ken Gisser advised that he is working with the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards to develop consistent training for board members. Now, I don't know when this item was going to come up next at the board, but I wanted to thank Doobie for the interest that he's shown in putting together a program. As Councillor Chang mentioned last month, that she's been here a year, and even she admitted that she's not even quite sure whether or not she's qualified to provide proper oversight over the police. So I just wanted to share with Doobie this book here. It's called The Police Officer's Manual of Criminal Offenses in Criminal Law by Gary P. Rodriguez, and say that there's a whole page right here on explaining what the rule of law is about. And I think that would be a great foundation for Doobie to make his training program based upon. And I took a screenshot of it. It'd be easier to read off the page here. So the rule of law in this book says that a rule of law is a legal principle of general application sanctioned by the recognition of authorities that is usually expressed in the form of a maxim or logical proposition. The one that most people commonly would know is ignorance of the law is no excuse. It is called a rule because in doubtful or unforeseen cases, it is a guide or norm for a decision. The rule of law, sometimes called the supremacy of law, provides that decisions should be made by the application of unknown principles or laws without the intervention of discretion in their application. The rule of law is a composite of several different principles which, taken together, represent a value of fairness in the establishment, enforcement, and administration of the law. The different principles apply equally to laws relating to procedure and evidence and to laws defining specific offenses. The principles include the following. No one can be punished for an act unless the conduct in question has been formally expressed in law to be wrongful. As an example, how Miguel was told that he's not allowed to be in council chambers wearing a T-shirt with advertising on it. Nowhere in the law does it say anything remotely as absurd as that. No crime exists and no penalty can be imposed unless the crime and punishment have been specified in laws. The laws must be properly passed, example, in accordance with all of the specific procedural rules established for our parliamentary institutions. Criminal laws should not be made to apply retroactively. The definition of an offense must be stated with precision. The state may only use the criminal process to interfere in the lives of individuals where such interference is specifically authorized in law, and only to that extent. The law must apply to everyone equally, including those who wield authority. Now, back to in accordance with all of the specific procedural rules established for our parliamentary institutions part, this is Section 6 of the Legislation Act, enacting clause. An act shall contain at the beginning the following words to indicate the authority by virtue of which it is passed. Her Majesty, I guess it needs updating, by and with the advice and consent of the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Ontario, enacts as follows. Now, I just want to point out two acts of the Province of Ontario that don't have this enacting clause, ironically, are the City of Toronto Act and the Police Services Act. So in these minutes, it also mentions, it should be noted that Councillor Burnside has been sworn in previously on August 21st in order for him to be able to take on his duties. Now back to some of the maxims that I just spoke of. One is every oath ought to be founded on certain knowledge. Another one is an infamous person is repelled or prevented from taking an oath. I'm assuming that's why municipal council members are given a declaration of office to take and not a proper oath of office. This one says the form of taking an oath differs in language, but agrees in meaning, for it ought to have this sense, that God is invoked. And I'm only saying this because, I don't know, maybe he made a mistake, but I noticed that Councillor Burnside last month took an affirmation of office, not an oath of office, that ends in "so help me God." And all of you should ask why. Sometimes you need God's help. And I would just respectfully ask Councillor Burnside if maybe next month he could come back and reconsider and take the proper oath of office that ends in "so help me God."
Any questions of Derek? Thank you. So may I have a motion to receive the minutes from October 19th? Ms. Kostakis seconded by Ms. Spencer. All in favor? And then we move to item number 5. I note that I believe it's Mr. Bogle on this screen and would like to speak on item number 5, which is a report from Chief Demkew as it relates to a request for review of a service complaint investigation, specifically number PRS 081443. Can you hear us, Mr. Bogle, and are you ready to start?
I can hear you. Can I be heard? Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. We can hear you. So anytime you're ready, sir, please, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the time, Chair, Council, all those in attendance, as well as those who are online. My name is Council Jason E. Bogle. I'm going to be addressing the request for review pursuant to Section 63 of the Police Services Act of the report that was made by Joseph Martino in case file number 20 TCD-124. And of course, there were a number of items that were requested for review. I just want to first congratulate the Toronto Police Service in their response in relation to the MCIT. I agree and I concur that since the incident that took place in May 27, 2020, the Toronto Police Service has notably invested in the MCIT, the mental health response unit. But in this particular case, this case that I am on, which is the Regis Korchinski-Paquette case, is one that is and cannot be separated from the issue of race, as well as from the pre-dating event that took place on May 25th, 2020, with the death of George Floyd in the States. Following that, on May 27th, Regis Korchinski-Paquette had died at her apartment on the 24th floor, and the police investigated the incident with the SIU. And subject to Joseph Martino's report, we did make a request for a review of the issue of I believe it was item number 2, which was that there wasn't, or the complaint did not address some of the recommendations by Justice Tulloch in his 2017 report. And in that regard, I just wanted to highlight that one of the recommendations of Justice Tulloch was 5.3 of his report, which reads as follows. It was recommended that the SIU should have the discretion to conduct an investigation into any criminal matter when such an investigation is in the public interest. When deciding whether an investigation is in the public interest, the SIU should consider the following. If there is a request to investigate from the Chief of Police, a police service board, the Attorney General, or the Minister of Community Service and Correctional Services. If the conduct in question involves an allegation of criminal fraud, breach of trust, corruption, obstruction of justice, perjury, or another serious criminal offense, or if the matter is potentially aggravated by systemic racism or discrimination. I believe on behalf of the family, I just wanted to reiterate that the family still has concerns regarding whether or not there was an obstruction to obtain certain information in relation to the cell phone that was present with Ms. Korchinski-Paquette moments before she passed away. As noted, the family has filed a civil suit in regards to this matter, but I believe that they're imploring the board to consider overall context of this particular case and its significance. The significance being that there has very rarely been a polarizing event such as the death of Ms. Korchinski-Paquette that took place on May 27, 2020. We saw that there were marches, there were rallies, there were a number of concerned persons from our community that asked for an immediate investigation into this matter. I believe that the SIU were deployed immediately, and yet to this date, we still have not been able to figure out what had occurred in respects to the cell phone and the overall broad implications to the community itself, meaning that I know that the board response was that there was no action to be taken in relation to my recommendation that this was a case where the employment of certain resources was sought by the family, that being cellular tracking of her phone following her passing. We are requesting that the board consider the overall implications and the concerns of the family, given that this was a highly polarizing case. The OIPRD, through their investigation, was able to give the family some answers that unfortunately they didn't have at the time of the passing of Ms. Korchinski-Paquette, answers that confirmed that there were only officers in the apartment with Ms. Korchinski-Paquette before she made her way out to the balcony, as reflected in the report by herself. But notwithstanding that, the overall context that the family would like would like the board to consider is the fact that the reliance on the SIU and in their investigations and the resources of the police to
Mr. Bogle, if you can hear me, you're muted, it appears.
Justice Tulloch is one that recommends that there will be the application and the service to the family to address what would be seen as a lack of answers that they are, of course, discovering as they go through the process of trying to decipher exactly what happened on that fateful day. And so I implore the board to review some of the recommendations that Justice Tulloch had highlighted, that being back in 2017, 5.3, essentially recommending that whenever dealing with situations that involve race or concerns of the public, that there be transparency. And what we've seen in this particular case is that as a result of the OIPRD's investigation into the SIU's investigation, information that has come forward has been both helpful as well as illuminating to a number of questions that the family still continues to grapple with. And I appreciate taking the time to highlight these issues with you today as the family continues to address this tragic loss that took place back in 2020. And so I appreciate the time. I appreciate your attention, and those are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bogle. I appreciate your comments on this specific matter. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bogle? All right. Seeing none, we haven't. Thank you very much, Council. We have another deputation, and that is Mr. Langenfeld, and I believe he's going to be appearing virtually.
Understood.
Yes, good morning, Chair Morgan. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Langenfeld, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just mention that there is a difference here on the broadcast between the sound of what we hear from the people there in the auditorium, where you're much quieter compared to the people that are online that we can actually hear well, whereas the people in the auditorium there, it's very difficult to hear you. So perhaps you could look at that for future. Here regarding this item on Ms. Kaczynski-Paquette, I'm hoping to share my screen here on that item. Okay, I trust you can see that?
We can. Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. Okay. We can.
Thank you. So just going through a few points there from the report. So it mentions on page 3 here of the report to the board that the service does not have a specific policy that addresses systemic racism. So I'd like to suggest that perhaps that's an indication that that should change, and the board should, if necessary, develop a policy on that, and certainly that that would involve public consultation and folks like Mr. Bogle and the Kaczynski-Paquette family having the opportunity to make submissions there. Moving on to page 4, in the analysis here from the board, it mentions that Justice Tulloch's recommendations were only relevant to civilian police oversight bodies, and of course that is the board, and so it seems that the service is in fact telling you that while the recommendations were not made to them, and they point out further here, his mandate precluded him from making any recommendations directed at police services. So clearly he won't have made any recommendations for the services, but we know he did make several recommendations for police boards. So it seems that we actually require some further feedback here from the board going over those recommendations from Justice Tulloch that were related to the board. And perhaps you could verify that, in fact, all the items and issues that he highlighted there have been addressed by the board. And then that's those same comments are repeated again here regarding whether there is a need for broad systemic change in TPS policy and procedures. And of course, policy comes from the board, procedures come from the chief, as per the Police Services Act. I also note here in the information from the service, it says, quote, nor were any of the recommendations related to systemic racism within police services, and yet Mr. Bogle in his submissions here just pointed out a comment there that I believe he was in fact quoting Justice Tulloch's recommendations regarding the SIU, giving consideration to that. So obviously there is some mention there about systemic racism. Then on page 5 here, it talks about a new procedure for the MCIT, and memorandums of understanding are already being developed and is still being drafted, and a final version has not yet been approved. But there needs to be public consultation, and by definition, that consultation has to precede the final version. So when you talk about having a final version of these things drafted, I think we really need to be having the public involved and see if there's any additional recommendations that they have to offer on what the MCIT procedures may be missing, even with these new planned versions here. Now, switching over to the Divisional Court's review, here at paragraph 59, it talks about the fact that there were, in fact, approximately a dozen calls for service at the deceased's home previous to this final call, and that in paragraph 60 here, none of the officers could have read any of the occurrences while en route as they were all driving. And, of course, this was during COVID, and so there was no each officer was alone in the car, and they didn't have the opportunity to go over the past information, as I understand or assume is the standard policy here for officers. But I'd like to suggest that perhaps the solution here is that certainly if an officer is alone in a car, and perhaps in all cases, we should perhaps assign then the responsibility of reviewing past call history and information like previous mental health issues should be done by the dispatchers then, and that they should be informing officers if there were in fact any prior calls that they should be notified of, not just giving them information that, oh, well, there's a great big file here that you can spend 10 minutes reviewing.
I believe your time is up, Mr. Langenfeld.
I'm sorry?
I believe your 5 minutes is complete with respect to your deputation.
So if I could just, I'll touch on this again, but just in their conclusions here, the Divisional Court did find that 50% of the officers failed to turn on their microphones. So I'll touch on that later in the other information, but that's certainly something that's very important here. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. And I believe both the board, I know the board has an anti-racism policy and strategy as well. I believe Toronto Police Service has done. It's one of the 81 recommendations, and I don't know if Deputy Dalawa wants to comment more. And also there have been as well, you commented on the MCIT and ameliorations to those units, and that is an ongoing process too as well. So I'll just turn it over briefly to Deputy Dalawa.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair, for giving me a moment just to speak about some of our equity work. So we've been working on an overall equity strategy that has a significant anti-racism lens. It's effectively an anti-racism strategy as well as an internal focus around respectful workplace and inclusion that's been in the works for the last couple of years now. We are in the process right now of socializing it with our many partners, kind of internally as well as external to the service, and so hoping to be able to publish that in the coming couple months, probably early in the new year at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Langenfeld? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Langenfeld. And we had a final written deputation. I just want to thank Nicole Corrado. It's in the materials, and thank you for her deputation on this particular agenda item. And so at this point, having heard from the deputants, may I have a motion to approve item number 5, which is Dempu's report? Ms. Kostakis, and seconded by Ms. Spencer. All in favor? Seeing nobody opposed, it's
Sorry,
carried.
Chair Morgan, I just was wondering, are we recommending that no action be taken? Or is there an option to consider a further review as a board?
Sorry, I'll let Dr. Kanengisser explain the options here.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, the options that the board has right now are either to concur with the findings of the report or to set up a committee of no less than 3 members to further review this matter and come back to the board with recommendations.
So I'm hearing from our deputants that there is an opportunity to learn some more from what has happened. And given that we're still scoping out the MCIT new procedures, it would be valuable, I think, given the intensity of what has transpired, that, you know, I think taking a moment to review it, I don't see, I think the family is asking for it. I think the broader community would appreciate it. And I think it would be helpful. So I would actually like to move that we do form a committee.
I would be happy to second that motion and participate on such a committee.
Ms. Spencer, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I think that could be done within the framework of the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel. So I would like to recommend that it goes there.
I hear that there are still some outstanding questions related to the specific incident as well. So I think that there are 2 tracks of work that are very important for us to do in tandem. While I don't disagree that the anti-racism work is really fundamental and important for us to move forward, I think a deeper review on this particular issue could help inform even better and hopefully more tangible and sustainable actions as part of that bigger picture work. So respectfully, I would disagree and just say, not disagree, but propose that we do go forward in both. And again, happy to lend my time and energy to that. If Councillor Chung is also willing to do that, I think it sounds like we would only need 1 other board member to participate in striking a committee.
If I may, just to clarify, the role of the board would be only not to review the events that took place, but only the board policies and service procedures surrounding this, just to be clear.
Understood. Thank you, Doobie.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're just taking a moment so that Ms. Akeem can put the motion up so we can see it actually.
Thank you. I'm just having trouble hearing the audio in the room. So I saw Deputy Mayor Morley leaning in and I'm trying to lean in, trying to hear. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done to
I note Vincent's in the room, and so he's mindful of what you have just commented on, Councillor Chang.
Great.
So maybe we can try to improve your ability to hear, because we can hear you quite well. So
Thank you. It improved right away, actually, when he spoke. So, yeah, thank you.
okay. Okay, so we now have the motion on the screen, and the first is that the board direct a committee comprised of, as we have volunteers of Deputy Mayor Morley and Councillor Chang. Is there any other volunteers? Would anybody else like to sit on it? Nadine, Ms. Spencer. So now we have, so that'll be the motion. We can fill in the names to review. It's not actually reviewing the complaint and make recommendation to the board how to proceed after the committee's review is complete. And the second item is direct the executive director to notify in writing the complainant, the chief of police, and the independent police review director of the decision. And as Dr. Kanagisser said, it relates to the nature of the review and the policies surrounding the review, not redoing the actual review as to what events took place and what findings there were. So can I have a motion? Ms. Kostakis, seconded by Ms. Spencer. All in favor? All in favor? Oh, right, she's a name. All right. Yes, I'll move it. And Ms. Kostakis seconded. All in favor? Could we just have a show of hands? I'm sorry, but the emotion actually obstructed your faces. Mr. Bogle, I don't think you get to vote.
He's with us in spirit.
Yes.
I just like to raise my hand, participate.
Mr. Migliori? Okay. All right. Thank you. So the motion has been approved. Just an indulgence.
We have to leave it as review the complaint in general, because that's under that.
Okay, yeah, even though, but we've put it on the record as to what we're actually looking at.
So this is how you leave it, or you want to be more specific than that?
No. I made comments to
Okay, yeah, that'll be in
on
the
the
minutes.
record. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I believe we've completed item number 5. Thank you. And then we can move back. I believe the second item is we have a presentation on gun violence and bill reform. Chief?
Thank you, Chair. The presenters are here, and if they come up, I'll just make some opening remarks and turn it over to Deputy Chief Johnson, and thank you. Firearm-related calls for service, specifically shootings and homicides, continue to be a concern for the Toronto Police Service. The devastating impact that these violent offenses have on our communities cannot be underestimated, and are particularly catastrophic when they occur in congregate settings. In May of last year, when we sought the board's endorsement on our enhanced efforts aimed at bail reform pertaining to gun violence in our city, we outlined a number of steps and stages that we would pursue in this effort. Part of what was proposed and promised was a means in which to accurately capture community sentiment. Today, we will present our findings and share the lived experiences of those that live, sadly, in sheer terror, fearful of the prevalence of gun violence in their communities. I want to thank the team from our bail and parole unit for their tireless efforts in this initiative, which has progressed through a number of stages to bring us to this point today, and particularly thank the leadership of Inspector Ken Taylor and Inspector Mara Abdulmalik. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Rob Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. It's my pleasure to introduce Inspector Ken Taylor, who represents the Provincial Rope Squad, the Toronto Police Service Fugitive Squad, and the Toronto Police Service Bail and Parole Enforcement Unit, along with Inspector Mayor Abdelmalik, currently with duty operations, but previously with the same unit as Inspector Taylor. This morning, they're going to lead a presentation that will highlight the results from a survey that sought to seek the sentiments of community members on gun violence that plagues our city. You'll hear how this initiative was facilitated by the Ministry of the Attorney General, select members of City Council, and the community at large.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you very much, Deputy Chief. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge a few people who, without their support, this initiative would have been delayed getting off the ground. Namely, our Chief, Chief Myron Demkew, then Deputy Chief Myron Demkew, City Councillor Francis Nunziata, former City Councillor and now MPP Michael Ford, and Mr. James Cornish. In May of 2022, Inspector Mayor Abdelmalik and I appeared before the Toronto Police Services Board with a presentation on gun violence and bail reform. Our proposal was to increase community safety through a multi-pronged approach that included the following. First, to provide recommendations for legislative change. Next, to create a bail support team to strengthen the relationship with the Crown Attorney's Office and ensure the most comprehensive bail packages are presented to the court in a consistent and coordinated manner. And finally, to conduct community engagement in order to capture and record the impact of gun violence on the communities of Toronto. Our goal was to create a document that reflects the public's sentiment on gun violence and confidence in the justice system in a manner that can be presented in court. We are here today to provide an update on the last section of this initiative. Since your approval, the Toronto Police Services Board and the Toronto Police Service have collaborated with the Ministry of the Attorney General, City Councillors, and various stakeholders within the City of Toronto to capture and record the impact of gun violence on communities within the City of Toronto. Through our collaborative efforts, with a three-part process was developed. Number one, utilize a third-party service, Forum Research, who are recognized by the courts as an expert within their field, to conduct a qualitative and quantitative study of community sentiment of the residents of the City of Toronto. Number two, to host divisional community meet and greets to obtain the public's opinion and perception on gun violence and the justice system as it relates to bail for persons charged with firearm-related offenses. And number three, to combine the results from the first two processes to create a document on community sentiment in relation to gun violence and confidence in the justice system as it relates to bail for firearm offenses. This document will be presented by the Assistant Crown Attorneys in court under the tertiary grounds at the appropriate stage.
To ensure impartiality and objectivity, we retained a third-party polling firm, Forum Research, to assist us with this initiative. Leveraging their expertise and in collaboration with our Ministry of Attorney General's Office and the Toronto Police Strategy Management Unit, we developed two sets of questionnaires for the studies. The first was for a qualitative study, where Forum Research conducted 27 in-depth personal interviews of 4 population segments from the City of Toronto: general population, LGBTQ2S+, Black, and Indigenous. Each of these interviews lasted approximately 60 minutes. The second was for a quantitative study, where approximately 1,000 Toronto residents, 18 years of age and older, were randomly selected, and interviewed. Some of the key findings from forum research are as follows. 78% of respondents believe that Toronto is safe. 68% do not feel that it is reasonable to release a person on strict bail into their neighborhood if the person is charged with possessing a firearm. 84% do not feel that it is reasonable to release a person on strict bail into their neighborhood if the person is charged with using a firearm to commit an offense. 94% do not believe that a person should be released a second time if the person has been charged with a firearm offense and has broken their conditions. Toronto residents generally believe that violence, including gun violence, is on the rise. In relation to gun violence in Toronto, some findings from the qualitative survey are: insights on gun violence varied widely between population segments. Those who said that they feel safe also advised that they change their behavior to avoid threatening situations. A common theme was that there is a need to address the root cause that leads individuals to engage in gun violence. In relation to gun violence in Toronto, some findings from the qualitative survey are: most felt that bail is an opportunity for rehabilitation rather than punishment. That in most cases, if someone were to break a strict bail, then clearly they are not changing their ways and would be likely to commit more of the same types of offenses. Additionally, sorry.
Chair.
Just a moment, some technical issues here.
Yeah, we're just getting the slide deck put up. It didn't load up.
Thank you, Chief.
I've got my laptop if that helps you. Did it come up? Sorry. Do you want me to grab my laptop? It doesn't help because the podium died. There we go. Give me a second. Let's see. Is it there? Come on.
Just a thank you to everyone for your patience. We're just trying to get the presentation, the slide presentation on the board.
So I'll start again with the qualitative survey results. So in relation to gun violence in Toronto, some findings for the qualitative survey are: most felt that bail is an opportunity for rehabilitation rather than punishment. That in most cases, if someone were to break a strict bail, then clearly they are not changing their ways and would be likely to commit more of the same types of offenses. Additionally, if there is no increase in level of conditions after a breach, then another bail breach would be expected to occur. Some felt that their opinion would change dependent on the level of bail breach. For example, a missed curfew or reoffense with a firearm. After completing these surveys, Forum Research then began to examine and analyze the results and completed a report with their findings.
In the first quarter of 2023, we collaborated with the Ministry of the Attorney General's Office, SAFE-TO, Toronto City Councillors, MPPs, TPS Strategy Management, Engage 416, and our moderator, Ann Wallington, an academic. Together, we organized 6 meet and greets within the communities that have either the highest or the lowest gun-related crimes in the City of Toronto. The data used for calculating these statistics was drawn from our Analytics and Innovation Unit for the year 2021. Included were firearm arrests, firearms seized, the number of shooting and firearms discharged incidents within this year. In the end, 6 divisions were chosen. For the highest instances of gun-related offenses, 12 Division, 23 Division, and 43 Division were chosen. For the lowest instances of gun-related crime, 11, 13, and 53 Division were selected. Recruiting the attendees to attend these meet and greets from the communities was completed in a consistent manner. It involved the identified division with the assistance of Engage 416, SAFE-TO, city councillors, and politicians. All the meetings were conducted in local community centers, libraries, or local churches, and they were all moderated by Ann Wallington. Toronto Police Service civilian scribes, an adjunct professor, and some of his students all assisted with note-taking and recording the community responses. All meet and greets were conducted in the same format. The attendees were provided with a PowerPoint presentation on bail and the law on bail. Questions were created in conjunction with the Ministry of the Attorney General and Toronto Police Service Strategy Management. All of the participants were asked the following 4 questions. Number 1, do you think gun violence is a serious issue in your neighborhood? Number 2, in terms of release on bail, do you think that the courts are dealing with the individuals charged with gun-related offenses properly? Number 3, if a person is already on bail for a gun crime and they should commit another gun crime while on bail, how should the courts deal with this person? And finally, question number 4, if you could tell the courts your concerns about guns in the community, what would you say? Additionally, QR codes with control measures to avoid duplication and skewed results were made available with a link to an online questionnaire to community members who were unable to attend the meet and greets and expressed a desire in contributing. Key findings from the 6 community meet and greets: gun violence has a negative impact on youth of Toronto. Gun violence causes reduced quality of life for the community it occurs in. The consensus among all communities was to have stricter bail conditions and harsher sentences for those who commit gun crimes. There is a pronounced concern in regards to gun violence and crime within our schools. At the conclusion of the 6 meet and greets, Ann Wallington analyzed the community responses and compiled a report of her findings. This report included public perceptions from within these communities on gun violence and the justice system as it relates to bail for persons charged with firearm-related offenses.
During our meet and greets, some powerful messages were received that convey our community's concern and sentiments, and you'll see some of them up on the slide right now. Toronto Police personnel, including neighborhood community officers, Engage 416, as well as representatives from the city, were present and provided support and referrals to follow up. Action to address some voiced concerns is already underway. We also received some insight from our communities through the online questionnaire, which again you see some of up on the screen. Concerns regarding bail were shared with representatives from the Ministry of Attorney General's Office and the Firearm Bail Support Unit for action. In terms of next steps, we're currently working with the Ministry of Attorney General's Office to summarize the two reports provided into one court-ready document with the intention of having an assistant Crown Attorney present it to the courts at an appropriate stage of a criminal hearing. It is anticipated that this will be an ongoing project to ensure that the information pertaining to community sentiment is current and relevant. We have already started discussions with Engage 416 and the City of Toronto. We will be partnering with the City of Toronto to leverage some of the networks and organizations that they have partnered with, specifically SAFE-TO and the Toronto Office to Prevent Violence. As we move forward, we will work with our EIHR, Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit, city partners, and our communities to ensure we use a critical human rights lens. Thank you for your time, and we are open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. For anybody who's joining us either virtually or any of the other board members, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Chang.
Thank you, Chair Morgan. This is helpful, and I'm just wondering, is the goal then that this document or a summary document would be created that just becomes part of almost every hearing, that the Crown prosecutor would present this to support public trust being protected in bail hearings?
The document that's going to be presented is going to be presented at a bail hearing, and it will be presented by the Assistant Crown Attorney, and there'll be a judge and the person who is charged with the firearm-related offense will have legal counsel. It's very important at this stage that we get all the information and we get the community sentiment on this document, and we just have one document that we're using, that the Crown Attorneys will use from across the city. This is an ongoing thing, ongoing project, and we have to wait to see what happens after the first time the document is tendered by the Assistant Crown Attorney in court, in a court proceeding, and I guess we'll move forward after that. I hope that answers your question.
It does. And would there be a consideration of expanding the use to include repeat offenders of violent crimes with weapons? I'm just thinking about the young man who was killed on the subway platform, and this was a repeat offender with weapons, but not necessarily a gun. Would that scenario also fall into the use of this document, or would the document have to be expanded?
No, so I'll take that, Chair, if I may.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councillor. This document focuses on gun violence to provide the lived experiences of the communities that live with gun violence and to provide their perspective to the judiciary in a meaningful way so that the judge or justice can be given the perspective of those who are most impacted by gun violence in their considerations on whether to release someone on bail or what conditions to place on them, etc. At this point, I would say from a legal process perspective, the first stage is focusing on gun violence, and we're going to see how that evolves. There are other opportunities for victim impact statements to go in, and those are used as a matter of course on different types of crimes, including circumstances like you're describing. But this is uniquely positioned to deal with gun violence, and that's quite frankly because the perspective of the community, the radiating impact of gun violence on our communities is not heard in our courtrooms, and it needs to be heard, and that's the objective.
I wonder, Chief, if I could just add a comment. It might be a little confusing because already in Toronto, we have at the Ministry of the Attorney General, or was my experience when I was there, they bill firearm teams. So there's a multi-pronged response. Number one, the packaging that's prepared by the appropriate officers as it relates to gun violence is continuously updated, it's thorough, and it gives the Crowns an ability to present the full picture, and that is on the primary ground, whether or not that person is likely to flee the jurisdiction, and number two is whether or not there's a likelihood they'll engage in further offenses. And then there's another ground, which is the tertiary ground, which is the public interest ground. And that is where that particular document, as I understand it, comes into play so that, for example, in a neighborhood that's ridden by gun violence and something happens again, and as your point was, especially if it's somebody who's a repeat offender, they can also tender in updated form with an evidence-based approach, another factor for the jurists to consider. So not only is the person going to engage in more crime, are they going to run away? Number three is, would releasing this person bring the administration of justice in disrepute because of this person's behavior, having regard to this evidence-based approach and numbers about this type of violence happening in the community. So that's it. So it's that approach, but having regard with Toronto Police's very efficient methods of getting the most updated information on not only firearm offenses, that has specific teams, but other violent offenses.
Thank you. I have another question, but I'll let Deputy Mayor Morley, she can ask for the next question.
Thank you, Lily.
Deputy
Councillor
Mayor.
Chen, appreciate that. Thank you so much, Chair Morgan, through you. I wonder, just from a sort of zooming out, sort of bird's eye perspective, as a result of this work and the findings that I think are so critically important, and I do want to express my thanks to the leadership team for this work and for the great partnership that took to bring this about. We heard through these findings, and we know sort of anecdotally from our experiences that gun violence certainly disproportionately impacts, some members of our community, often though communities that are in deep poverty, racialized communities. These are too common of occurrences and experiences within those communities. And I think just holding space for the experiences and sharing of the impact of that reality is really critical, right? Understanding people are petrified living in their communities, right? Some of the other maybe mental health and other impacts, right? So I just wanted to inquire with the chief and with command, how are the findings of this not only informing the position around bail, but informing our approach to policing in the city of Toronto and how we engage with the communities that I've just spoken about?
That's a great question, Councillor. Listen, we're taking steps to document what our officers are learning and hearing and informed by on a regular basis. Let it not be lost on anyone that those who respond to this in the first instance wear a Toronto Police uniform and rush to those events to make communities safe, and then call victim services and then assist families through not only the trauma of the event, but the ensuing investigative processes, sometimes court processes, and other considerations that are in and of themselves super challenging and impactful on those touched by gun violence directly. And of course, if you think of our neighborhood officer program and how they interact with our communities to listen and learn of the lived experiences in the communities they're serving, in a nutshell, everything we do is informed by those perspectives. So, you know, the long answer or the short answer to your question is we are very much impacted by those perspectives in everything we do. Our prioritizing of our efforts, my role as chief in prioritizing the lean resources we have are informed by those perspectives, which is why we repeatedly and continually say the most pressing public safety issue in this city continues to be gun violence. So in short, Councillor, that's or Deputy Mayor, that's how it unfolds for us on a daily basis.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that.
I believe Vice Chair Kostakis had a question.
Thank you. And just prior to my question, I think to add to what the chief said too, there's other resources within our communities, like the crisis response the cities and engages with, as soon as an incident like that occurs too, engages with the various communities and social service agencies that are there, which have firsthand sort of obviously contact with the individuals and the victims, as well as sometimes the perpetrators within these situations, especially when the youth are involved. But also to that end, I would presume that in moving this forward, that the community members, I don't know if you have found the community because of their fear as well of even speaking out or engaging with police in any type of research or feedback, and having worked within all of the communities you mentioned and still continue to. Do you find that people are coming out more and speaking to us or working with the police and engaging in such gathering of this information, but also in the supports? And I presume that moving forward that there will be opportunities to still continue to work with the communities that are affected by these violences.
This is obviously the first time that this has taken place, so we'll learn by our mistakes. There's a few other things that we'll do the next time. But one thing that I noticed, and I've been around a long time because you can tell from my gray hair, but I live in the city of Toronto, and I was shocked by some of the statements that these people said. We kept a low profile. There was no uniform members inside any of these meet and greets. They knew we were cops, obviously, because when we walked in, but I found that, unfortunately, at two of the meet and greets, we had 10 inches of snow, so that was a problem, but we had a few people show up. But the ones that attended, and Councillor Burnside actually was at one of them, and the people spoke very freely. We got a lot of information. They spoke. It wasn't like, you know, I don't want to talk because the cops are here, or I don't want to talk. It was because of Ann Wallington's professionalism. She made it very, very comfortable for these people to talk, and that's why we have all these quotes. So, but moving forward, we're gonna, you know, there'll be lots of people call once they find out about this, and we'll organize it with the chief and the command to see if we can do it better the next time.
Chief, you wanted to add something?
Chair, to put a fine point on it, for this to maintain its relevance in a court proceeding, we've committed to a yearly update of the document so that whatever's tendered in court is actually relevant for current events and current circumstance across the city. So we will be coming back to this type of engagement for this purpose every year.
Councillor Chang, you had your hand up, or okay. Is that another question, or you just left your hand up?
No, yeah, so I have actually just confirming what Chief just said through the chair, just wondering, so is it that annually there will be an in-person engagement similar to what was described, as well as surveys being done, or is it just the community meetings that will be done on an annual basis?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we'll be doing both. So, you know, in this case, the polling company, Forum Research, they did kind of the scientific approach. You know, they're an independent third party to ensure impartiality, and then we'll do the community meet and greets again. And this year, we're hoping to reach more communities as well.
That's great. And the other question I had was, there was a quote that was in your presentation that said, you know, people feel that bail is an opportunity for rehabilitation. And for people who are accused of gun violence on the first time, what type of rehabilitative opportunities are provided for someone in terms of trying to divert them, to rehabilitate them so that they don't end up in a cycle?
That part is really out of our hands. What happens if a person is out on bail is they attend court, and then they have to adhere to to what the judge restrictions are put on them. So unfortunately, in this system, the way I understand it, rehabilitation does not really occur until you're sentenced. So I think that there would be somebody else better to answer that question than myself, but the way I understand it is the rehabilitation in between the charge and the conviction is, unless you're in custody, there is some assistance to the people in custody. But if you're out on bail, no, there isn't.
Or perhaps just, it's possible as well that sometimes, you know, during the bail hearing, evidence is presented. For example, somebody either has a mental health problem or they have a substance abuse, so it can be part of the bail, terms that people, you're kind of addressing, like there's a kind of a proactive approach before the person even goes to trial or pleads guilty or sentenced. So that's part of it, but Inspector Taylor is correct. Generally, rehabilitation is considered a sentence.
Yeah, and Chair, there's also the restorative justice centers and whatnot that are out in the city, so it really comes out to the services that are available after the fact.
Thank you.
Ms. Spencer, were your questions answered, or you had another one?
Yeah, just one additional point. You mentioned there was, I think, 371 individuals that was part of the community groups, and I read the statements on their comments in terms of fear of the gun violence and so forth, and I just wondered if there was an opportunity for an anonymous, for individuals to be part of a group that it would be anonymous, their responses and so forth, just because they may not necessarily want to voice their true sentiments in a public forum.
So we didn't record any names. We did record some demographics just for statistical purposes, but we also had the option using the QR codes to actually go online to do it anonymously. That way, if people were not comfortable attending in person. And we did get many responses and a lot of support in that area. So we did give that consideration, and we did make it available to people who did not want to be there in person or who couldn't be there in person.
Yeah, and I just wondered, how did you get the individuals that participated? I'm just responding from what I've heard from the community groups. It seems that the number would have been higher than what's reported here.
We used the neighborhood officers, so they plastered pamphlets all over the place. We used MPP's offices, we used city councilor offices. They went into all the neighborhoods. A lot of the neighborhood officers went door to door to the areas. We promoted it as best we could. That's another thing that we'll sit back and look and how better we could. But as I said, 2 of the nights, there was the worst 2 nights of the winter. So we had like 10 inches of snow, and we still had people show up. And kudos also to those students from Seneca College who came in that weather to help us with our notes too. But we plastered pamphlets all over these neighborhoods through the neighborhood officers, through city councilor offices, and stakeholders in the area to help us put it out, and that's the response that we got. And we were happy with the response, except for the two ones where we had snow.
But like Inspector Taylor said, we're always open to any ideas or thoughts on how we can reach out to more people as we plan to grow this as well, to reach out to more communities. So.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. And believe now we have several deputations. Giuseppe Scolari. While Mr. Scolari is rising, I just want to thank Sathi Yasi Baba Scarborough, who put in a written deputation that's part of the materials. Mr. Scolari?
Hi, everybody. I was really sad when I heard the members of the Jewish community speak. Because nobody should be afraid. Nobody should be afraid to take their kids to school. I don't have kids. I have nieces and nephews. And I wasn't expecting to have this reaction to listening to the two members of the Jewish community. I grew up in Toronto. You know, I lived in the U.S. for 20 years. I lived in Los Angeles. I traveled extensively in the U.S. and went to a lot of cities that I saw deteriorate. Portland, Seattle, Chicago. I still travel. I work in the music business. And, you know, I work for a company that experienced gun violence at a festival where 60 people were murdered. And the people I work with to this day, a lot of them, they had to quit, and they suffered from PTSD. And, you know, the fear is real for me, because I live in Etobicoke in what's quote-unquote a safe neighborhood. And about a month ago, 3 people came to my front door at 4:47 in the morning, according to my Ring doorbell, and they tried to push in my front door. And my girlfriend was asleep, and I have a dog, and I slept through it, but I guess the dog must have done something that they went somewhere else. The next day, I heard that 3 people kicked in a door of a house, went in, stole cars, pulled a gun when the people woke up. They were carrying sidearms. So I now have a bar at the front of my door. I have cameras. Thankfully, I have a dog. She's cute. She looks cute, but when you go to pet her, she'll probably bite your hand. And if somebody actually got into my house, I don't know how I'd react. I do know that everybody I talk to now, there's no conversation like there used to be about, hey, what's going on with the kids and hockey, and what about the Leafs? There's a lot more conversation about how unsafe everyone feels. So, you know, I implore the city councilors here that on the budget committee that the police need more funding, not less. It's a hard job being a cop. You know, I wouldn't want to be a cop. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle being a firefighter or a nurse. Yet, these people are treated with disrespect. You know, there used to be a saying, respect the badge, but criminals don't respect the badge because they don't have to fear it anymore, because the system allows them to take advantage of their civil liberties of people that deserve it, and they don't have to worry because they're going to be set free and they can go commit another crime. You know, I support the American Civil Liberties Union. I'm a dual citizen. I support the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. But first and foremost, I support public safety. And, you know, everybody has a right to free speech and to protest, but they don't have a right to commit crime. They don't have a right to come into my house when I don't want them there. You know, in America, I can have a gun in my house, and if someone comes into my house, I can take the appropriate action. I can't do that here. I don't want to do that. I have a house in Florida. I don't need to do it. But here, I feel like I have to do something now. And it's not just me. You know, these guys did a survey. I have thousands of people in my phone. I talk to hundreds of people a week in the course of my job. The venue we do concerts, we have 17,000 people, and I feel safer there because of the pay duties and our security than I do on my own street in my nice neighborhood. And I didn't plan on coming here, but I didn't really even know this existed. But I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to come here. You know, I'm not afraid for myself. I'm afraid for other people. And I'll just close by saying the problem isn't going to get better. It's going to get worse, and that's unfortunate. So thank you.
Mr. Scolari, really appreciate your heartfelt and your comments, as well as your appreciation of Toronto Police. And I'm really sorry what happened at your house and also to your neighbors, to have a home invasion on your own street in a quiet neighborhood. And I'm sorry to hear that. And I can see, like what you said, a lot of us feel we're not actually afraid of ourselves, but we're afraid for everyone around us. And so I really appreciate you coming out and actually speaking on this really important topic. And thank you for your support. We really appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Scolari? No, again, thank you, sir. Really appreciate that you came today. And the next person to make a deputation is David Robinson. Should we? No, all right. Well, thank you to both our deputants. And at the present time, may I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Langenfeld. We had another virtual deputation. Are you able to hear me, Mr. Langenfeld?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that. I had some cell phone problems and it went down, but I trust you can hear me now.
Yes, Mr. Langenfeld, I can hear you. So whenever you're ready to go, please start.
Thank you, Chair. So looking at this report here, in Table 30 here, it talks about the Black community and South Asian community having raised the issue of the source of guns and where they're coming from. And so I'm wondering from the service whether there is a policy of having targeted projects to try and deal with the issue of gun suppliers and importers, things like that. Whether more of that kind of targeted thing on importers and supply of guns is what we need to try and deal with some of this situation. And whether the criminal code sufficiently empowers police to deal with things like gun dealers and weapons importers, or are there legislative changes needed on that side of things? And then in regards to weapons suppliers, do the courts sufficiently apply the laws that are on the books from the service's point of view? Are the maximum penalties that may exist there sufficient? And do the courts, from the service's perspective, do the courts actually apply those maximums sufficiently? Now, moving on to the actual here, point 9 under Section C, it talks about what forum actually used as their questions, and they start with, under the criminal code, persons arrested for a crime have a right to a bail hearing within 24 hours. But that fails to mention that those criminal code requirements, in fact, reflect Section 11E of the Charter, which stipulates that any person charged shall not be denied reasonable bail without just cause. And to make clear, I'm one of those 94% of the people that believe that if somebody was out on bail for a weapons charge and has a second weapons charge, bail seems unreasonable to me. And so I support that. But what this preamble fails to sort of put out to the public, and what hasn't come up here anywhere in our discussions, is the fact that, generally speaking, and the service will have to let us know whether this applies as well for gun charges, but generally speaking, anecdotally, 2/3 of all charges laid by Toronto Police don't result in a conviction. and generally it takes a year to 18 months for those innocent people to be acquitted by a court in those cases. So what we're talking about here is a situation where we're pushing to deny bail where 2/3 of those people theoretically might be found to be not guilty. And so we could have people sitting in a prison cell, and as I understand it, the pre-trial jails are far worse than our prisons, in fact, and far more dangerous and violent. And so we could have somebody spending a year to 18 months in jail and, in fact, be innocent of the charges. So that's really a large part of why bail exists. And so I'm wondering from the service side, is there something that we can do to actually speed up how we're getting to getting these trials heard? And of course, most of that is the Ministry of the Attorney General, but we know that they often say that they're having issues with getting the disclosure and information from the police services in order to begin the whole process and do the disclosures. So I wonder if sort of how good are we at actually providing that information, and how quickly are officers making disclosures, and would it be helpful if our policy was simply that police officers don't go out onto the road until they've finished all their disclosure work and made their notes, given their notes to the Crown from the previous day, or that they do that before they actually go on to start doing new police work? Because, of course, if a charge doesn't lead to a conviction, it's not of as much benefit as we would hope. And I'm also wondering, are there any statistics of whether from the service or the Ministry of the Attorney General, whether they can provide some statistics of how often do people that are out on gun bail, how often are they involved in a second violent crime? How often are they actually convicted of being in possession of weapons for a second time while they're out on bail? And again, I would support the idea that they shouldn't be granted bail if they're caught a second time, but I'm wondering how often does that happen? And given that we know that in many cases the people aren't convicted on the charges laid, we certainly have to be careful, especially given the lengthy time involved. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. Perhaps you had a lot of questions, but perhaps the chief could just very briefly answer, because you were asking about source of weapons and what, if any, is to be done by trying to deal with those who are the weapons traffickers supply, what happens to those who get caught with them, and what if, how are people dealt with in the courts in terms of sentencing, and what if any legislative changes are being made to help. So maybe we can start with that.
Thank you, Chair. Gun supply, as it relates to crime guns in the City of Toronto, is something that I've spoken about repeatedly, testified at in different hearings, and presented here on many occasions. And the fact of the matter is this city has a problem with the proliferation of criminal handguns, and 90% of them emanate from the United States. We have repeatedly indicated our prioritization of gun crime, and that includes taking steps to investigate, disrupt, dismantle, and prosecute where possible those involved in the illicit supply chain. We work very closely with our provincial partners, our federal partners, and importantly with our American partners as it relates to the criminal supply of illegal handguns into this country. We're very integrated with our law enforcement partners in everything we do, including the sharing of information and exploiting every investigative opportunity that exists. We also are a leading agency as it relates to the tracing of firearms, which is a very important exercise for us, an important investigative step that we do everything we can to trace the root of firearms to the last known place they come from. So the deputy can rest assured that our prioritization of our operational deployments is on the most important thing plaguing this city, which is gun crimes. And in that workflow, we very much are invested and work closely with all our policing partners to do everything we can to disrupt the supply chain. And listen, we've had some amazing success. Our folks have done great work disrupting the supply chain. There was a number of investigations announced throughout this year in that regard. As it relates to statistics on bail, I'd draw attention to our previous board reports on this issue around bail reform, which we quite comprehensively reported on statistics around firearms bail. I don't have it before me, Chair, but that board report that we submitted and was approved is quite comprehensive in that regard. With a lot of information. And as it relates to law reform, we have advanced, and in fact, the chair and myself wrote to the Prime Minister on the issue of law reform that included not just bail reform, but reform around gun crime, particularly as it relates to sentencing and the provision of parole, and as it relates to shootings in what we refer to as congregate settings, which in the context of policing the municipality, the size and scope of Toronto, is particularly important when we do have shootings in public spaces where people come and gather, whether it's the Eaton Center food court or a playground where children are playing. And indiscriminate, violent criminals fire their handguns, causing harm, injuring, and quite frankly, intergenerational trauma is felt by those individuals who experience or are near or are touched by that kind of crime. And our law reform package included that type of consideration for the government of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. So at this time, may I have a motion to receive this presentation? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Councillor? Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. Just because it is of public record, I'm a little confused by your number of 2/3 of charge. Could you bring that back up on the screen? 2/3 of charges?
Mr. Langenfeld, I don't know whether you're still on the line and you can put up, I think it was one of your last slides where you talked about 2/3 of offenses end up in acquittals.
Yes. So that, in fact, goes back to John Stuhl was speaking previously, and he, in fact, introduced that number in one of his speeches, and there was no sort of rebuttal coming from the service in that regard. I've raised it since on several other occasions. If there are other statistics that say otherwise, I would love to hear them. I'm sure that every Torontonian would love to know, in fact, what the statistics of convictions are. I've asked that the service, in fact, arrange to have the ministry report back to the service based on the GO codes so that you can track what leads to conviction and what leads to acquittal, and so that we can have some accurate statistics. But I don't know of any other published statistics other than those having been brought up by the former mayor.
Okay, so in that regard, do you know if with his quote-unquote statistics, which I think is using the term loosely, but that's just my interpretation. But do you think that he took into account where someone might be charged with multiple offenses and then they end up pleading to one offense, and like let's say 3 or 4 are withdrawn based on a plea deal? Do you think he took that into account into his statistics?
Again, I have no idea, and as a former mayor, he would have had access to actual information from the police service and been able to get answers to questions. Okay. This is why I would ask the board to arrange to have the service report those kind of pieces of information in combination with the ministry, and in fact, it'd be great if we had some information. I certainly can appreciate that there would be lots of cases where multiple charges would only lead to one conviction, and all the other charges might be withdrawn or dealt with otherwise. So, but of course, if we don't have any statistics, we in the public are left to deal with what we do here and what doesn't or does get denied by the service or other groups. So. Councillor, if you know for a fact that it's not 2/3 that are of the charges are stayed or withdrawn or rejected by the courts, that'd be great, but I'm assuming that you, like I, don't know for sure because we don't have actual statistics.
Yeah, that's just kind of the point I'm making, is we don't know for sure about that 2/3 number. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Langenfeld, all proceedings in the court as they relate to processes that either result in an acquittal or withdrawal or diversion or a guilty finding are a matter of public record. So Deputy Stairs, I'm not sure. I mean, we have no problem in sharing that kind of information with you. It's public information.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, the information is public and published by the courts and is the responsibility of the courts. We are, as a performance measure and as part of the analytics framework build out, we have backlogged getting that data. And there are discussions between myself and MAG, Ministry Attorney General, to get that information in order to feed it directly and electronically to us. Being able to do that analysis presented would take a lot of work. My instinct is that 2/3 is significantly high, and it would also break down into a number of different workflows. So plea deals that reduce the number of charges, charges that are taken off but other charges continue, straight acquittals. So that's actually quite textured in terms of what it means and what it looks like.
Yeah, and my guess is that it's offenses as they relate to against the administration of justice. I think there has been that bandied around the 2/3. I do not think, but I cannot say categorically it applies to gun violence or firearms.
And this is part of the problem. If the service thinks that it's a nuanced thing that it's going to require them to really look into to come up with meaningful information, then obviously as a member of the public without access to any of the services information, that's simply impossible for the public to come up with. So I think it really behooves the board to have the service provide that information and really be able for the people of Toronto to be able to understand what's happening with Toronto police, because of course most of the ministry's reporting is going to be provincial, and so it wouldn't really tell us what's happening in Toronto compared to other areas.
Thank you. And as Deputy Stairs, we're working on it, and thank you for your deputation. At this point, can I have a motion to receive the presentation? Ms. Kostakis, seconded by Ms. Spencer. All in favor? Any opposed? And now we will move on to item number 3. Before we hear from Mr. Morin and Mr. Langenfeld, I'm going to make a motion that the board approve amending the 2024 schedule by changing the board meeting date of January 12th to January 11th, 2024. By way of background, I believe there's a city meeting on January 12th that has several, if not all, of our city council board members. So that was the reason for amending it. Can I have a motion, please? Nadine, seconded by Ms. Kostakis, to change the January meeting date. And I believe now, Mr. Morin, you would like to make a deputation on item number 3.
Again, Chair Morgan, my mom called me Derek. So, on the weekend, if you stay up late enough and you go on CPAC, they show those Supreme Court of Canada hearings, and I was watching one this past weekend. And I was listening to Justice Jamal was saying that Section 32 cases are essentially because we just can't have government going around subdelegating their authority to other entities and saying, aha, see, now we've found a way to circumvent the charter and we're no longer have to subject ourselves to complying with guaranteed rights and freedoms. And it's kind of as if Peter Hogg passed away and automatically his clarification of Section 32.1, which included the statutory flow down, which included bylaws, and it just kind of just disappeared into the ether. So in this report, it mentions the board has expressed an interest in pursuing opportunities to better engage Toronto communities through its meetings, policy development processes, and broader community engagement. But that's as long as you sign up by 12 p.m. the day before. Also says, it is our hope that by effectively bringing meetings into communities, members of the public will have more opportunities to engage with the board. Again, as long as you sign up by 12 p.m. the day before, not 12:01 p.m., mind you, but 12 p.m. Goes on to say, ultimately, deeper engagement with higher participation will assist the board in carrying out its oversight and governance responsibilities as more voices are included in the board's discussions and decisions. But unless you attempt to sign up after 12 p.m. the day before, then your voice will not be included. Your voice will be excluded. And Section 17.1 of this board's bylaws state that persons wishing to make a deputation, right, those are two terms of art, to the board regarding an item on the meeting agenda may be heard with the permission of the chair, provided the following requirements are met. A, the request must be received no later than noon on the business day preceding the day of the meeting. Now, I should point out that by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied. In doing so is fraud. God bless His Majesty the King, and long live His Majesty the King. And if I have ever led this board to believe in any way that I am a person as mentioned in the definition for deputation in this board's bylaw definition section, then that would be a mistake, and that I ask the board to please forgive me, because I can't tell you, Chair Morgan, every time, you probably don't know this, but not too long ago, you used to sign up to speak at this board meeting by just simply picking up the phone, and the board administrator at the time was Deirdre Williams. And the last time before this all started, the last time I spoke, it was actually Sherry filling in for Deirdre Williams. I didn't think I had anything to say until at the last minute. And I came in here, no problem, just signed. I can't tell you how much I resent seeing this little blurb here when you sign up. Requests must be received no later than noon on the business day preceding the day of the meeting. It's like, we all have the freedom of expression, and Chief Demke talked about freedom of expression at the beginning of the meeting. But the idea that it can be restricted because you didn't sign up before 12 p.m. the day before, that's, like, come on, that's embarrassing. Like, no offense to you, Chair Morgan, but, like, you're a member of the Law Society. You also took an oath that, amongst other things, said that you shall not pervert the law. But that's exactly what's going on here. I know it seems like such a little ticky-tack thing, but after hearing Chief Demke at the beginning of the meeting say that he expects everyone basically to follow the law, right, to keep order and all that stuff, the idea that this board, what this board is saying by telling us to do this small little thing, 12 p.m., is saying that, you know what, we all took an oath of office, Constitution, but whatever, we're above the law, and we don't have to comply with Section 32.1. Now, what I have noticed in the past couple of months is that you've made a couple of exceptions for people to still speak here, even though they didn't sign up by the deadline, because I think deep down you know that this bylaw violates our freedom of expression. And there's a Supreme Court case that says it's not expression, it's freedom of expression, and this bylaw restricts freedom of expression.
Thank you, Derek, and pleased that you always make the deadline because you're always here. So, thank you.
Well, hold on a second. Like, by the letter of the law I spoke last week, what if I came in here on principle and wanted to sign up at the last minute? Now I'm putting Chief Demke in a tough position. Like, what do? Do I call my officers on him and have Derek dragged out? I'd rather not do that. We've all been getting along for the last several months, but it's the principle of the thing.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. We also have a deputation, Mr. Langenfeld. Can you hear me, Mr. Langenfeld?
I can. Thank you, Chair Morgan.
Thank you.
Excuse me. On this, sorry, I'm actually not sharing my screen this time, and that throws me off. Okay, so there's 10 meetings scheduled. I'd like to point out that historically, going back to prior to Mayor Tory's election, basically around that time, it was always 12 meetings a year that the largest police force in Canada had 12 board meetings a year. Now apparently it's 10. I think there's enough going on that we could at least go back to 11. There's nothing booked right now for February, so I'd suggest, even if you guys want a holiday in August, fair enough, but I think we could all make it here in February. Also, the schedule doesn't include any planned budget dates, and I note that, for example, now we've got the next budget meeting comes up in 2 business days. It's on Monday. At 10 a.m. And as Derek mentions with this signing up in advance, I haven't even started to look at the budget, but of course I have to sign up by noon tomorrow. So I've already signed up to speak on the assumption that I'm going to want to have something to say, and then I'll have to actually look at the information to decide whether or not I actually have something to say. I don't make a habit of doing that on every regular agenda, but there are often times where it's the night before the meeting that I actually get the time to go through the 200 or 300 pages of documentation. Looking at the times and locations section of the times and locations of board meetings section of this report, it mentions in the third, fourth line here the manner that best complies with public health guidance in terms of how these board meetings are taking place. And I notice there's certainly a far, on those rare occasions where we see a shot of the public gallery, there's far less seating available to members of the public than there is to members of the service on the other side of the room. And I'd love to know what public health guidance it is that the board thinks it's following, because I don't think that's actually, 2 years ago that may have existed. I don't think that actually exists anymore. Moving on to the top of page 3, it mentions that all these public meetings will commence at 9 a.m., followed by the in-camera portion. Previously, again, going back to the days of Alec Mukherjee being the chair of the board, in those times, the in-camera meeting took place in the mornings, and the public meetings started at 1 o'clock or 1:30 in the afternoon. And first of all, that certainly works better, I think, with the public's schedule and their ability to attend, and makes it easier. And that means occasionally we actually have people able to come in the evening and speak. But there's also actually a court decision, and unfortunately I haven't had time to go look it up, but I recall that there is a decision talking about how in-camera meetings should normally take place where if there is an in-camera matter that's being dealt with, once it becomes apparent to the leader of the meeting that the issue no longer meets the requirements of being in camera, that it should then move to the public side. So really, you should be holding your in-camera meeting first, so that if you decide and get to the point in your discussions that it's no longer items covered by Section 4 of the Police Services Act, 35 sub 4 of the Police Services Act that has the exceptions to when meetings shall be open to the public. If you're not meeting those requirements, then it should in fact be happening in the public. And I would just like to commend the board here. I notice in the next paragraph it does talk about the board office will work to identify venues outside the service's headquarters. I look forward to that happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. And Dr. Cannon-Gisser is going to respond to a few of your comments.
Just on the matter of
can you make
seating.
sure you speak loud into the microphone, because I couldn't hear you last time.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you.
Just on the matter of seating, I just want to say there is no distinction between a public side and a service side. If the side closer to the door runs out of seating, then people are encouraged to move on to the other side of the room where they can sit as well. So and we have additional seating available in case that's necessary. That's it.
Okay, well, I have to respond to that because that goes back to the time that Dion Renee was taken down by 3 officers because she tried to go in the other door. So, and I stood there and I had one of your officers pushing me, and you may recall that we had one of the deputy chiefs leaving the meeting back in those days to come deal with me dealing with one of your officers trying to push me around. So in fact, while that may be the current version of the interpretation, that's certainly not what the public has been led to understand. So I'm glad to hear that we're allowed to in fact sit on the other side of the room if we do agree to get searched and actually come into the building. And again, I look forward to there being a meeting somewhere where I don't have to be searched and I'll actually show up in person. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. Deputy Morley, you had a question?
Yeah, just a question for staff, Madam Chair. Thank you. For those of us who are new, the deputant mentioned the previous sort of order of business that in camera did in fact come first, and I think there's some good sound rationale to why that makes sense. I'm wondering if maybe Doobie or others around the table might be able to share what was the impetus for it to change away from that, and whether there's a possibility for us to go back to doing our in-camera portion of the meeting to start the day and move into public for the afternoon to allow more participation for members of the public.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Certainly, we have been going back and forth on that question. We have had this discussion a number of times over the past couple of years. The main reason for the way that we do things now is that it's very difficult for us to accurately time when the public meeting would start if we start with a confidential portion of it, which means people will either be waiting here for potentially hours before we start the meeting, or people will have to figure out when to join online and try every once in a while to see if the meeting has started. Once we start the public meeting at a set time, it makes it easier for members of the public to join without waiting unnecessarily.
Thank you. At this point, can I have a motion to receive the item number 3, which is the board meetings for 2024? May I have a motion? Ms. Spencer, seconded by Councillor Burnside. All in favor? Thank you. And then moving to item number 6, a report from Chief Demke as it relates to special constable appointments and reappointments for November 2023. And Miguel, I understand you are making a deputation.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm here to make a deputation on my favorite topic, the TCAC Special Constables. Speaking on this issue since the month of June, I recall last September 25th, the first budget committee, Chair Morgan, you make some comments at the end that dismissed my concerns about the TCAC Special Constables, and you suggested that I take my complaint over to the TCAC board, which I did in the month of October. I went to the board and mentioned to them that it is a waste of taxpayers' money when it comes to leaning and trusting the CSU officers will deal with noise bylaw complaints effectively. They are not trained to deal with noise bylaw complaints. I mentioned this to the board. Everybody hear it, and still they pass their motion, whatever it was, and didn't take under consideration my concerns, because basically I'm trying to give them a hand. I'm not trying to destroy them. I'm trying to help them out with legal liabilities. And, and it's sad that they reply back to me saying that, as always, Miguel, for emergencies, including threats to life, always call 911. Non-emergency matters like noise complaints and antisocial behavior, you can report to the Community Safety Unit at 416-921-2323. So that was the answer to my request to take my complaint over to the board. And as you can see, nothing has been done. Unfortunately, this is going to end up in a court, into a human rights tribunal to make amendments, to seek for what we want is public interest, remedies. Because relying on the TCAC special constables, it has been proven to be a waste of time. Half of my building were interrupted of their sleep. Our mental health was not addressed. So I'm here to say that, again, repeating my words, that I don't consent to the reappointment of these TCAC officers on the list because they lack the opportunity to deal with, they don't have the training, let's put it this way, to deal with noise bylaw complaints. Only municipal law enforcement officers can come and address those concerns because they had the technology, they had the training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that is my my 2 cents with regards to today's comments. I heard repeat motions or comments regarding to what's going on in the city of Toronto with escalation of violence, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm glad that Deputy Morley is on the call and Councilor Lily Cheng is on the also on the Zoom call. I asking you both. I think Councilor Burnside step outside. The city of Brampton and the city of Mississauga has endorsed to end this, the violence in Gaza. I'm here with this sign that says Toronto City Council endorses permanent ceasefire in Palestine. And I'm exercising my rights and freedoms, and I'm telling you guys that this is the you should follow suit as City Council. Deputy Morley, I'm looking at you to make those a motion that we can have peace in our communities. As the delegation of the Jewish community said, it's been 6 weeks. The same is for the Regent Park. We have also Muslims in my community. They want peace. They don't want to live in fear. So in order to do that, you have to make a motion, please, demanding ceasefire permanently in that region of the world because it's affecting home. And really it's unnecessary. And if you have the courage to put this motion in council, I will really appreciate it because the city of Brampton, the city of Mississauga, both cities has passed motions requesting that the hostages be returned and the ceasefire be completely done so that we don't have to have this protest on the streets because I'm a protester as well. I support, human rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Any questions?
Oh, thanks for the water. I'm going to take
Yes.
one home.
May I have a motion to receive?
Sorry, I have a question of staff based on the deputation.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, have there ever been any studies done on the effectiveness of special constables and TCHC? Is that something we have to ask TCHC, or is there some purview or oversight provided by TPS of the special constables?
Councillor, maybe I can assist you. We do evaluate their program, and part of the appointments and reevaluation, there is a check and balance that's put in place to make sure that they're in adherence of the regulations and our oversight.
So it sounds to me that there are some communities that do not feel their presence is effective. Have there ever been surveys of people living in Toronto community housing to reflect whether or not the presence of the special constables adds to their sense of safety or has helped to mitigate dangerous situations?
Not that I'm aware of. Maybe the TCHC board themselves could address this. Maybe the councillors present here might have some insight, but I'm not aware of any.
So if we were to request one, would that mean that we would have to request one through TCHC?
I think that would probably be the most appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Morley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just wanted to also pick up on a point from the deputant around the noise bylaw sort of oversight and support. I don't know if anybody around the table here today can speak a little bit to that. I was surprised to hear that that was a responsibility of the TCHC officers, as of course we do have our municipal licensing and standards group and noise bylaw offices in each of the districts of the city. So I just wanted to get a little bit more insights on that if anyone's able to share.
So this is a little bit of a complicated issue. You'll know from the AG's report with respect to the Toronto Police involvement in noise bylaw that we can't address those because of calls for service and the priority of what those things are. And the request or sort of the recommendation from the Auditor General was that the city beef up their MLS metro licensing standards to be able to address those issues. There's equipment issues, there's personnel issues, there's times of coverage issues as well. The Toronto Police Service can enforce city bylaws, and I believe the TCHC enforcement officers also have the authority to enforce that.
Thank you. So the authority is there through our appointment, but is the training also included?
I'm told it is.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for Chief Demke's report as it relates to special constable appointments? Vice Chair Kostakis seconded. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morley. All right, all in favor? No one's opposed. Moving on to item number 7, which is a report from Chief Demke as it relates to semi-annual report of publication of expenses, January 1st to June 30th. And we have a deputation by Mr. Langenfeld.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Chief, I'm going to pick on you this time, but I do so in a friendly way. Just pointing out here something that's a appearance of impropriety issue. So on your report, you were in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Leadership on Counterterrorism, and attending with you at the same time, we had Staff Superintendent Pauline Gray and Deputy Chief Lauren Pogue, and just considering the reasoning that we had our recent mayoral by-election and what led to that, there's just a certain, again, appearance of impropriety or questions about senior male anybody traveling with female staff and going and spending a week, especially in Vegas, but anywhere really. So thank you, and Chief, that wasn't meant to be mean or anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burnside, you said you had a question. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know where to start, but so what was this they went to in Las Vegas? Hello?
Sorry, Councillor Burnside. I'll share it again here. So this was the, I gotta find it now. This was the Las Vegas counterterrorism for a week.
Okay, thanks. So, I have limited time with my question, so I want to get in what I can. So they're at they go to a counterterrorism.
You don't have limited time, but go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, thanks for sorting that out for me. I appreciate it. So they go to this counterterrorism thing, but that looks inappropriate because it's in Las Vegas. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I'm saying that there have been issues in the past that we all know well about of males and females traveling on foreign trips that end up
So am I
leading
too?
to
Okay,
some
thank you.
questions. And so it's just something, we got to deal with the realities of the situation these days, and what used to be necessarily acceptable isn't always acceptable these days.
So am I to infer, thank you for that insight. Am I to infer that a male and a female shouldn't go on professional trips? Is that kind of what you're saying, given the current state of affairs?
It raises some questions, I think, in a lot of people's minds when that happens, and it's it's one thing when they're equal. Well, I'll leave it at that. It raises some questions on occasion. So.
Well, I'd like you to expand on those questions because you've raised the issue, and I'm trying to really wrap my head around this one. So, go ahead.
Well, any time that we have a senior boss going on in this case, a week-long trip where taxpayers are spending almost $9,000 to send 3 people to Las Vegas for a week for a conference. Meanwhile, of course, we have most of what the public has to deal with when we're dealing with our government. We're compelled to do it all remotely and online. So the taxpayers spend $9,000 to send a man and 2 women to another country, to Las Vegas of all places, but really anywhere overseas or whatever. We had other people going to Australia, but they were going as lone individuals. So it raises some issues when we start having, when taxpayers are funding to send people to other places. And this question of, first of all, is it justified for taxpayers to have to spend $9,000 to send 3 people to a meeting? And secondly, is it appropriate that it's a male and a female, or 2 females, or whatever the mix may be? That certainly has to be taken into some consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for your insight. I'm new to this board, and now I understand where you're coming from. Thank you very much.
Okay, and just to touch on your other issue of board members do not have limited time in asking questions. That actually, we went back and looked at that previously before you joined the board, and Councillor Nunziata was chair of the board at the time.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kostakis, I believe you wanted to ask a question.
No asking, just a comment that I think when we hear deputations making comments regarding the financial pieces of concern is relevant. Making any other comments that were made borders on defamation of character and is also very inappropriate. Having those thoughts it's 2023. People travel all the time. It isn't about male or female. It is about the positions and the training and the collaborations within our services to better educate and train our service so that we're serving our communities. And I would just caution that comments like that be kept out of these platforms or any platform, and that any validation of what just transpired should have been just based on the financial pieces.
Well, fortunately, I do have freedom of speech, and so I can say whatever I want, and I can be sued if I've said anything inappropriate. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. May I have a motion to receive this report and deputation? Board Member Spencer, can I have a seconder? Vice Chair Kostakis, thank you. Moving on to item 8, which is a report from Chief Demkew. It's the Toronto Police Service Annual Statistical Report, and I believe we have a deputation from you, Mr. Langenfeld.
Thank you, Chair. And of course, this is a enormous report, so I'll try and go through it here very quickly if I can load it up and share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see this now. So looking at the actual report itself, on page 2, it mentions speeding tickets issued and the doubling in 2022 compared to the number in 2019. And I'm just wondering if that is only tickets issued by officers and perhaps special constables, or does that include the photo radar tickets being issued? Going on to the annual statistical report, on page 8 at the top, it talks about the reported crime, and I note that rate, in fact, is the number of crimes per 100,000 population. Looking at total crime, we've gone from, in 2018, 40% of the cases cleared to 2022, 32% of the cases cleared. So that's a pretty significant drop there, and I'm wondering if there's sort of some further information to be taken there. I just note here the derived population, which I took by taking that rate and the amount of reported crime to figure out what population the service is using in this report. That also is in the next section here on, unfortunately, the way this works, I can't see, on crimes against the person. So I'm glad to see that crimes against the person we've actually improved, and we've gone from 56 to 60% clearance rate between 2018 and 2022. I hope that continues, and if there's anything that should be happening to continue that improvement, I hope that'll get shared with us here. Crime against property, on the other hand, has gone way downhill. So we've gone from 25% clearance, 1 in 4 crimes solved, down to 16% clearance, less than 1 in 6 crimes solved in 2022. So that's certainly an issue, and it's not like it's a huge increase in the number of reported crimes. It's simply a huge decrease in the number of cases cleared. So I'm wondering if there's an explanation as to why that's happening. Traffic code has gone from solved or cleared 24 out of 25 cases, now down to 9 out of 10 cases. And I have a hard time understanding how it is that 1 in 10 cases of criminal traffic code offenses don't get cleared. So I guess I'm wondering what circumstances does a traffic violation not get considered cleared? We've also had a drop in other criminal code violations in the clearance rates. Looking at the divisional level reporting, there's certain divisions that have done far better than others, and others that are below the curve. And so I'm wondering if the chief has something that is there a way to take sort of the leaders who are achieving these great results in some areas, perhaps they can help out in some of these other areas to look at how they might improve their numbers. Auto theft, of course, we all know that. We're now down to half as much clearance. So we used to only clear 14%. Now we clear 7% of the cases. And on that, I was wondering if the chief might just like to consider telling people, put one of these, not to promote any particular company, but these AirTag things in your car. And you know what, if your car gets stolen, tell us what that AirTag code is, and the police will respond to wherever that says your car is, and we'll find these people. Looking at whatever page this is, down to the personnel staffing level here. I noticed that a lot of the numbers here, parking enforcement officers, court officers, actually dramatically increased during COVID lockdowns at the time that the courts were actually closed for most of the time, and yet we've got a 50% increase in the number of court officers. Looking at taking from those numbers and looking back to the population numbers that I mentioned earlier from Figure 1, that I worked backwards to get our population, this brings our POP to COP, I think is the term that the service uses, our population to police officer ratio. And this is one of the things that when we're dealing with the budget, the service is going to be coming forward and saying, well, we're below Chicago and Los Angeles and all of Canada, but what they don't take into account is the special constables. So when you start factoring in the civilian staff, and there's no breakdown here where other civilians, thousands of them, what is enforcement and what is admin, but when you take those into account, our pop to cop ratio actually gets down around Los Angeles's figures and better than all the ratios in Canada. So, and then finally, that still doesn't take into account the special constables that are TTC, TCHC, and U of T, who are, of course, on a separate budget, and so they are involved in law enforcement. And when we compare to other regions, those other regions that we're comparing to, it's all police officers that are generally doing that work, whereas here in Toronto, we've got that split up to a bunch of different agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a number of issues raised as it related to various clearance rates. Did anyone want to make any comment from the command team?
Well, I'll kick it off. I know that was sort of an omnibus of comments, but as the Chief Information Officer, I am putting forward the data disclosure. Number of items. Speeding tickets are don't include photo radar. That's governed by the city. We are trying to have more synchronization and coordination with the city and where they place those, and having a larger overall impact. The speeding tickets are, I think, down in terms of the number of tickets we've issued, and that's a resourcing issue. Total crime clearance is going down. The most violent crime clearance rate is going up, and that is a question of focus as well as a question of resourcing. We have a great many vacancies in our CIBs, MCUs, and specialty units. So getting the investigators and the staffing has been a challenge, and I'm sure the other deputies could speak to that better than myself. So that speaks to crimes against persons trends, crimes against property trends. We're also seeing that in terms of vacancies, temporary vacancies in divisions, but you might have someone who's on a long-term sick, and so we have vacancies at divisions. So we're seeing staffing issues across divisions, which may be partially driving those variances in closure rates by division. The special constables, we do make great efforts to make the apples and oranges comparisons as similar as possible. So when we're comparing to other jurisdictions, we are including what would be the same function as the police. For example, compared to New York, they have Port Authority, they have a transit police. There's a bunch of different functions, and we're trying to match that up in a similar way. And I'm not sure if there are other comments from other deputies or chief. Do you want to make that point?
If I could just add to that, Mr. Langenfeld, and you'll see this through our budget submission, and you did mention it briefly, but I think it would do well to remind you that since 2015, our emergency calls for service have grown by 26%, so it's a demand and supply issue. In the same amount of time, our personnel has almost decreased by 600 since 2010, when the population has grown by 460,000 people. So, you know, it's a matter of doing what we can, where we can, when we can.
Yeah, just to underline that, the pandemic years are now behind us. So the comparability is really 2022 to 2019, as opposed to 2020 and 2021. The trend which dipped through the pandemic years in terms of calls for service has come back with a vengeance. And so we're basically on the straight line that we would have seen had we not had the pandemic. So we're seeing a 26% increase in calls per service in year. And I believe it's somewhere around 5 or 6% over the continuous increase.
Thank you to all the deputies that responded. And so at this point, may I have a motion to receive item 8? Councillor Burnside, seconded by Board Member Spencer. All in favor, none opposed. And we move to our last item, which is, oh, it's not last, sorry. Yes, item 9, which is the Toronto Police Service Audit and Quality Assurance Annual Report, and we do have a deputation from Derek. Oh my God, I thought it was the last one.
Quality assurance process to ensure that operational, management, training, and financial controls are established and maintained to ensure compliance with service procedures and with board policies, and to ensure service procedures remain consistent with applicable legislation, case law, inquest findings, Ministry of the Solicitor General guidelines or direction, and board direction. So I've been reading this guy on Twitter from Sweden who's been saying that Sweden has all areas of the government there have been infiltrated by the left. So I just had an idea for Chief Demke to ensure quality assurance and make sure that Marxists don't end up infiltrating the Toronto Police Service here. This is from Martin versus Law Society of British Columbia, 1950, Court of Appeal for British Columbia. A Marxist communist cannot be a loyal Canadian citizen. At best, his loyalty must be divided between Canada and the communist leadership outside Canada, which is engaged ideologically through him, whether he knows it or not, and others of like indoctrination in promoting disruptively in Canada and other countries. Another idea I had for ensuring compliance in the future, Chief Demke has also mentioned a number of times that he's committed to building trust in and within the service. So in terms of building trust within the service, you know, I was here last month talking about I've had Toronto Police Service members profusely thank me for bringing to light at these board meetings the COVID shot injuries that have been experienced by some of them, and that you know, they're not happy that they were coerced into taking those shots to keep their jobs. So one idea was ensuring compliance in the future with the Nuremberg Code. This is from Barker versus Barker, 2020, where the Superior Court of Justice said, Counsel for the Crown argue that the Nuremberg Code and Declaration of Helsinki are inapplicable here, as those instruments are treaties to which Canada is not bound. This submission misses the principle of medical ethics made by Professor Dickens. These instruments are not cited by Professor Dickens as a source of international legal obligation for Canada as a signing state. Rather, they are cited as an articulation of universally accepted ethical principles applicable to physicians, the essence of which was reiterated in Canadian instruments, including the Canadian Medical Association's Code of Ethics 1970. Moreover, these norms of ethical conduct for experimental medicine are now, and were during the STU era, well recognized at common law. So here's what Article 1 of the Nuremberg Code actually says. The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated as to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to enable him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. This latter element requires that before the acceptance of an affirmative decision by the experimental subject, there should be made known to him the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiment, the method and means by which it is to be concluded, all conveniences and hazards reasonably to be expected, and the effects upon his health or person, which may possibly come from his participation in the experiment. The duty and responsibility for ascertaining the quality of the consent rests upon each individual who initiates, directs, or engages in the experiment. It is personal duty and responsibility which may not be delegated to another with impunity. And I just wanted to point out that at last month's Board of Health meeting, Deputy Mayor Morley actually brought up adverse events related to these COVID shots. She asks, I just wondered if you could talk to us a little bit more about how we have monitored and communicated adverse events. And Dr. Irene Armstrong responded, amongst other things, saying, although the COVID vaccine technology was new in terms of providing vaccines, so although it's a new vaccine for us, it's been in the works for a couple of decades under rigorous scientific investigation. But it's a new vaccine that was developed in like under 6 months. And I've heard they're supposed to be taking 5 years in order to do that stuff. So there's no long-term safety data that anyone's been able to see. And these were really experimental shots, and everyone who took them was a guinea pig.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions? The next deputant is Mr. Langenfeld.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, looking at quality assurance here on page 2 for the audit and quality assurance, it talks about the fact that all audit reports will be submitted to the board in camera, and that contradicts what I mentioned earlier, which is the Police Services Act requirement. Section 35, sub 2 requires that everything shall be open to the public, with the exception of the items laid out, specific exceptions laid out in subsection 4, which are issues relating to public security and intimate financial and personal matters. And the fact is that none of these audit committee reports are of that nature, and on the off chance that perhaps one of them could involve that, then that should be the exception, but it would be inappropriate, and it is certainly inappropriate to have the policy be that all reports shall be made in secret. That violates the law. Looking at the appendix here of the plan for this coming year, they talk about the property and evidence management, and I'm reminded of a recent situation. I think it was an officer was actually charged with having violated the evidence management system set up there, and it came to light that in fact there had been, I think it was an OPP report that had pointed out a bunch of deficiencies in the TPS's property management system that had been reported to the TPS and still hadn't been dealt with. And I note here that it says that this comprehensive audit is provincially mandated to happen every 4 years. So I got to wonder how it is that happened, that an officer violated the requirements, and has that been fixed? And certainly I'd like to see that report. It also talks there on page 7 of Appendix A there about the MTO and looking here at a framework where there's supposed to be a report and an audit on volume searches of colleagues, family, public figures, and vanity plates. And certainly that seems like something that the public would be interested in knowing. Going over to page 8, it talks about body-worn cameras, and that this is a mandatory audit required by the board. And I'll refer to that a little further on here. So it also talks about the 81 recommendations in the next, on page 9 of that Appendix A, and a review of the 81 recommendations. And I'd certainly love to see what the audit has to say about all that. And so I hope that report is going to be made public. Looking at destruction of records, it talks about fingerprints, photos, and records, but it doesn't mention body-worn camera video and all the other types of video that the service collects and that we pay a fortune having to store. Looking at the Appendix B in the 2022 projects that are carried over, body-worn cameras was done last year, and this audit was apparently presented on June 7th of this year. So again, where is this information? Has the audit been made public as required by the Police Services Act and disclosed to the board publicly or in a public setting? Also on page 11 there, under Appendix B, is the audit of facial recognition. And this is certainly something, again, this is a report that's already been presented on September 27th. This is something we know the public had a major issue and concerns about. So where is this report for the public to see what the police are doing? And what is the exhaustive list of situations where we're using facial recognition? Because I know one of the situations where it was used was sort of an exception to the rules that they had just announced quite recently before they used it when we first got into this whole situation of facial recognition. And then looking at the cybersecurity side of things, is there a record of how often body-worn camera video is accessed, who it's accessed by, when? Are they accessing it, and are those records kept, and is it reliable information that we could trust that, in fact, body-worn camera video has been accessed, and we know who's viewing it, who isn't viewing it, and whether or not it's being kept secure, or whether it's simply entertainment for people to watch the interesting videos of what somebody's camera might have caught, which, of course, we all know certainly isn't what we expect. So that's it on this item.
Thank you. Any questions or any comments from the command team? You went through quite a lot of material, and all right. Seeing no questions, may I have a motion to receive item number 9? Vice Chair Kostakis, the seconder, board member Spencer. Thank you. And now moving to our last item, which is the Chief's administrative investigative reports. We do have a deputation, Mr. Langenfeld.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sure you're all glad to know that this is the last time that you'll have to hear me today. And sorry, I gotta figure out how to share this item. The challenges of technology and doing this all remotely. There you go. There's almost a minute of my time here getting it up. Okay, looking at these reports, Chief, first of all, these reports having the titles of subject complaint number so-and-so doesn't mean a lot. So as you see here, I've added my own descriptions. Some kind of information that we could actually look back at would be helpful. Looking at this first report, complaint 2023.23, under the analysis and director's decision, that's the SIU director. This issue, sorry, I'm in the wrong order here. So the first one is 2022.27. An officer turned off his body-worn camera and was subsequently charged by the SIU for sexual assault. And here the incident narrative describes how the constable stopped both the audio and visual recording on his body-worn camera. And the conclusion from the service is none of the examined policies and procedures require modification. The second report, complaint 2023.03, was a bank robbery that involved a bottle and a knife. In this case, the issue is that the body-worn camera video, according to the SIU director's report, supports that nothing went wrong, and that's great, and that's what we want body-worn camera for. That the proof that the officers acted properly, but unfortunately the SIU director violated the SIU Act and failed to actually make that information public and failed to publish any reasons why it wasn't being released, other than to just say, well, all information on video is protected, which obviously goes against the section of the SIU Act that says all video shall be made public. The third complaint, 2023.20, the person swallowed drugs and choked on the packaging. And here's another situation where this officer, according to the SIU conclusions, officer failed to start his body-worn camera as required by procedures. So although the service says that there's no change needed to the procedures, we see that time and again the procedures aren't followed. And that happened again in the Regis Korchinski-Paquette issue that we spoke about earlier, where, again, half of those officers didn't have their microphones turned on. And I would say that the problem is that we have officers turning microphones and cameras on and off when really I think we should just be turning them on, leaving them on, and making sure we're controlling access to the body-worn camera video so that we know who's accessing it and when, and that way we can protect everybody, including the police officers involved and all the members of the public. Because when we look at this last report, which is 2023.23, where the person was arrested for dealing, they swallowed a powder, they overdosed and died from it. But the SIU director's analysis is this issue, however, is quickly settled by a review of the video footage that captured the search. And he finds that, in fact, the video proves that the officers did nothing wrong. And that's what we've always said about the video, is that it protects the people, protects the officers. It's really what we need to have on all the time and make sure we're recording this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. Any questions? Thank you. Then I would ask for a motion to receive the Chief's administrative investigation reports, item number 10.1 right through 10.6. Motion. Thank you, Ms. Spencer, and Ms. Kostakis seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And at this point, can I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Burnside. I just want to point out the next meeting of the board is Thursday, December 19th at Police Headquarters. In addition, the board will hold 2 budget subcommittee meetings. One will take place on November 22nd. It's here, 7th. Sorry, November 27th. And the other one is on December 12th. That one as well is a virtual meeting and has virtual capability for the public as well. We encourage the public to participate in this important process. Thank you.